Chapter 338. His main body and avatar stood opposite each other. Experience panel. Jiang Ci muttered in his heart. Cultivation main body, nascent soul, 1.06 million 1.06 million in the later stage. Avatar, golden core, 397500397500 in the later stage. Dao technique, Dao of fire, 50 million in the 10th stage. Gale domain, 5 million in the 10th stage. Sword domain, 10 million in the 10th stage. Amplitude, 1000 times. Dao of fire, deduction, 10,000 experience points per attempt. Cultivation technique, purple firmament sword manual, peacock visualization experience points, 500. 3 months ago, his avatar was successfully refined. The result was almost the same as Jiang Ci's previous imagination. His avatar could also use the experience panel. From the data on the panel, it could be seen that the cultivation of his main body and avatar were not connected, but they could share Dao techniques. After all, Dao technique comprehension belonged to the soul. The consciousness of the two bodies was unified. If a golden core cultivator has this Dao technique, he should be able to kill an invincible nascent soul cultivator with a slap, right? This thought popped up in Jiang Ci's mind. After the avatar was successfully refined, he found that the experience panel could be used, so he used spiritual items to quickly increase the avatar's cultivation. As it already had the spiritual sense of a perfected nascent soul cultivator, it did not need to nourish and refine its spiritual sense. It could directly reach the perfected golden core stage. As for the later nascent soul stage, it had to be nourished by the golden core. There's no rush. I'll nurture it slowly. When my avatar reaches the nascent soul stage, it can really be used. Jiang Ci was full of expectations. In any case, it would only take 10 years to complete. When he entered the ancient Dao source world, it would actually only be 2 years. In addition, not only had his avatar's cultivation reached the perfected golden core stage. In this year, Jiang Ci had refined a large number of spiritual items. With the help of spiritual energy, he used the experience panel to raise his Dao of fire to the 10th stage, a perfected rare Dao of heaven and earth. Its amplitude had also reached 1000 times. If I had this Dao technique strength a year ago, I should have been able to get into the top 3. Unfortunately, Jiang Ci shook his head. At that time, the top 10 geniuses, except for Ji Wei, far surpassed the others. Only Mu Ning's Dao technique strength was equivalent to a perfected rare Dao of heaven and earth. Jiang Ci knew that there were no regrets. He could only continue moving forward and catch up later. Where there are gains, there are losses. The Dao of fire has reached perfection, but there are problems with the fusion of the 3 Daos. Thinking of this, Jiang Ci felt helpless again. In the past year, he had tried countless times to use the Dao fusion technique, but he had failed every time. He also had a rough guess as to the reason for his failure. There are 3 levels to Dao: true meaning of the Dao, Dao domain, and Dao of heaven and earth. When one cultivates the Dao of heaven and earth to perfection, this Dao technique will be equivalent to a flawless state. If I want to fuse it with other Daoist techniques, the difficulty will greatly increase. His master, Daoist Ge, did not explain much about the Dao fusion technique in his inherited memories. Because Daoist Ge specialized in array formations, he did not study much in terms of Dao fusion. Therefore, Jiang Ci could only wait to find out the answer in the future. The Dao fusion technique was a wonderful technique to increase one's strength, so he definitely wouldn't give it up. Jiang Ci pondered for a moment and put this thought aside for the time being. However, after reaching perfection in the Dao of fire, I can consider using Dao refinement to cultivate a primordial spirit. In order to cultivate a primordial spirit, one not only had to reach perfection in the nascent soul realm. One also had to possess a perfected Dao of heaven and earth to cultivate a primordial spirit. After completing this process, the primordial spirit would undergo a qualitative change and condense into a primordial spirit. Similarly, this was also a process that consumed time. It could be as short as 100 years or as long as 1,000 years. It depended on the strength of the Dao of heaven and earth cultivated. The speed of cultivating a primordial Dao of heaven and earth was definitely not as fast as cultivating a rare Dao of heaven and earth. And rare Tao of heaven and earth was naturally not as good as unique Tao of heaven and earth. The body of my main body and my clone are different, but the soul and Tao technique are interlinked. The process of cultivating a primordial spirit can be left to my clone. Jiang Xi smiled. The first use of the doppelganger was revealed. Next, his main body would cultivate in the ancient Tao origin world for 30 years. But his clone in the outside world would have 108 years. This was equivalent to his cultivation speed increasing by 3.6 times. It was worth mentioning that this method of using the difference in the flow of time between the main body and the clone to cultivate was not common in the cultivation world. Riverward also understood this principle because it was rare to see a place where the flow of time was different from that of the original universe. Currently, he had only heard of the ancient Tao origin world. And the qualification to enter the ancient Tao origin world was obviously very difficult. 3,600 people were finally selected from the hundreds of millions of people, but they could only enter the ancient Tao origin world to cultivate for 30 years. One could imagine how difficult this was. Pale blue planet, waterfront city. A late-stage nascent soul cultivator arrived at Bean Manor. This person had the appearance of a young man, and the supreme-grade spirit artifact battle armor on his body was embroidered with purple patterns. When he saw Jiang Xi, he bowed respectfully. Ku Luo greets senior brother Jiang Xi. Jiang Xi hurriedly waved his hand to indicate that there was no need for this. Then, he asked, "You call me senior brother, so you're also a disciple of the Purple Heaven sect?" "Senior brother, I'm a first heaven disciple of the Purple Heaven sect. According to the rules, disciples of lower heavens have to address disciples of higher heavens as senior brother, and immortals of the fifth heaven and above have to address them as martial uncle," Ku Luo said with a smile. Jiang Xi was enlightened. So that's how it is. Seniority in the Purple Heaven sect was not determined by cultivation, but by the 9 heavens. Thinking about it, disciples of the first 4 heavens had more than one type of cultivation. There were nascent soul, and Tao integration. If seniority was determined by cultivation, then it would be a mess. I wonder if senior brother has arranged everything here? If so, we can set off now, Ku Luo asked. It's almost done. Give me a moment. Jiang Xi nodded. Then, the two of them walked out of the cultivation room. Jiang Dudu, Shen Tian, Wen Yushin, Wen Feng, and Shen Wanxi were standing outside. Jiang Dudu did not say anything. Shen Tian laughed heartily and said, "Jiang Xi, when you get there, you have to cultivate hard. If I catch up with you next time, it will be embarrassing." "Haha, big brother, go ahead." Jiang Xi also laughed. "Take care, martial uncle," Wen Clan's siblings said. "You two have to cultivate hard too. If I come back and see that your cultivation has fallen, I will punish you." Jiang Xi showed the demeanor of an elder. Then, he looked at Shen Wanxi and said, "Old Shen, the scale of the Mountain Sea Star trade is getting bigger and bigger. Please help me support your chairman." Shen Wanxi nodded vigorously and said, "Jiang Ji, don't worry." Finally, Jiang Xi walked to Jiang Dudu, who had been silent. "I'm leaving." "Okay." The two of them looked at each other. They did not say much, but their emotions were already intertwined. Jiang Xi rubbed the little girl's hair and smiled like before. Then, he flew away with Ku Luo. Jiang Dudu looked at Jiang Xi's back. Her eyes were filled with determination. "Brother, you have to come back alive. Otherwise, I will find you even if I have to kill my way to the King of Hell's palace." The same words rang in her heart every time Jiang Xi left. It was like a promise that would never change. Chapter 339. Yushin, Wenfeng, Old Shen, it's time for us to get to work. Let's do something big. Jiang Dudu waved her little hand, hiding her dejected mood. Let's do something big. The Wen siblings and Shen Wanxi were all filled with motivation. Shen Tian was relieved to see this. Earlier, he was still worried that Jiang Dudu would be upset or something like that after Jiang Xi left. Now that they had something to do, they would temporarily forget their negative emotions. "Kid, you have to come back alive." Shen Tian sighed in his heart. "Cultivate. Cultivate. We can't let this kid be the only one in the limelight among the 3 strongest on Earth. Jiang Xi and Ku Luo flew to the teleportation hall in Waterfront City. Gong Shuo, who had been promoted to captain of the guards, was waiting respectfully in front of the hall. Greetings, Lord Jiang Xi. His exaggerated manner of greeting hadn't changed even though he had been promoted. Gong Shuo knew very well that all of this was because of Jiang Xi. This was because his good friend Shen Wanzi was now working for Jiang Xi. It was because of this relationship that he had been able to obtain the position of captain of the guards in the fiercely competitive Tsungyun sect. Jiang Xi nodded lightly and entered the teleportation array with Ku Luo. Ku Luo then began to set the teleportation coordinates, his hands constantly forming seals. These seals were extremely profound, and even Jiang Xi couldn't see through them. The teleportation coordinates of the Dao Alliance's Heavenly Court are the Dao Alliance's top secret, Jiang Xi thought to himself. Otherwise, the Purple Heaven sect wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to send people to pick up 3,600 prodigies. At the end of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, some prodigies had asked this question: why couldn't they teleport to the Dao Alliance's Heavenly Court themselves? Immortal Yi Liang's answer was simple and straightforward: they had to wait until they left the ancient Dao origin world before they were qualified to receive the teleportation coordinates of the Dao Alliance's Heavenly Court. Jiang Xi could vaguely guess the purpose of this. It was most likely to test the identities and loyalty of the 3,600 prodigies. The Heavenly Court of the Dao Alliance was the human race's highest authority. After all, the teleportation coordinates couldn't be casually leaked even in the inherited memories that Daoist Ge had given him. There was no such teleportation coordinate. In fact, he didn't even mention the Dao Alliance or the Heavenly Court, as if there was some sort of taboo topic. While Jiang Xi was thinking about this, Kolo had already set the teleportation coordinates. He cautioned, "Senior apprentice brother, the Heavenly Court of the Dao Alliance is 100 trillion light-years away from here. Even if you use a teleportation formation, it'll still take a very long time. You have to be patient." Jiang Xi nodded gently. It was just teleportation. However, when the teleportation light disappeared, his expression changed. Because there was a strong sense of spatial transformation. Even though he was already at the full circle of the original infant stage, his entire body felt like it was about to be torn apart. Normal interstellar teleportation, even if it was across star zones, would only take 3 to 5 breaths. This time, however, it lasted for half an hour. When these changes subsided and they landed on the ground again, Jiang Xi even felt like vomiting. Blurg, blurg, it wasn't Jiang Xi who was vomiting. Instead, there were many voices coming from the side. The teleportation had already ended, and he appeared on the other side of the teleportation formation. Jiang Xi endured the discomfort and looked up to survey his surroundings. This was a gigantic stone platform. Clouds and mist swirled around it, and he could see several gigantic stone pillars that soared into the sky. At this moment, more than half of the 3,600 prodigies had already arrived. He was quite late. Not far away, many of the weaker prodigies were supporting themselves with pale-faced hands as they retched. This is the Dao Alliance's Heavenly Court's Southern Heavenly Gate teleportation platform. Kolo's voice sounded. Southern Heavenly Gate. Jiang Xi's heart stirred. The first time he had heard of the Dao Alliance's Heavenly Court was many years ago, when he became Daoist Ge's disciple on the first moon. At that time, Daoist Ge had asked him who the master of the Dao Alliance's Heavenly Court was. At first, Jiang Xi didn't pay much attention to the Heavenly Court. Now that he heard the Southern Heavenly Gate, he couldn't help but think of something. This was because there were too many similarities between this and the legends on Earth. Why did the Heavenly Court and the Dao Alliance's Heavenly Court both have Southern Heavenly Gates? Jiang Xi, you're here too. Just as Jiang Xi was in a daze, Mu Ning's voice sounded from the side. The young shepherd boy had also arrived. With his shout, the other prodigies on the teleportation platform all looked over. Jiang Xi, you're here. Yang Jiufeng, Mo Hong, Li Xianxian, Lin Ling and the other top 10 prodigies all greeted Jiang Xi. Even Ji Wei nodded at Jiang Xi. Jiang Xi nodded back at them one by one. Prodigies were mostly proud and aloof. They would only lower their proud and aloof attitude when facing someone with similar talent. After Jiang Xi finished greeting them, Mu Ning continued excitedly. Jiang Xi, I've finally seen the great world I've always dreamed of. This place is too big. I thought it was like the Skyspan Mountain River diagram, the Kanglan continent and the Purple Clouds continent in the starry sky were all illusions. I didn't expect to see such a vast and magical celestial body in the original universe. A continent that's even bigger than a planet. He had a pure personality and never hid anything in his heart. After seeing Jiang Xi, an acquaintance, he could no longer hold back his words. At this moment, Jiang Xi was speechless. His face was filled with disbelief. This was because after the clouds in front of him dissipated with the wind, he realized. This southern heavenly gate teleportation platform was only a floating island. Although the area was very large, it wouldn't be crowded even if millions of people stood there. However, compared to this vast world, the southern heavenly gate teleportation platform seemed very small. Below was a boundless continent with no end in sight. A huge heavenly gate stood at the entrance of the continent. Above the continent, there were countless floating immortal mountains and immortal islands floating in the air. The immortal island where the southern heavenly gate teleportation platform was located was only one of them. Above the immortal mountains and immortal islands, there were layers of 5-colored auspicious clouds supporting them. Palaces and pavilions floated above these 5-colored auspicious clouds. That was where the Tao Alliance's heavenly court was located. When he looked up at the sky again, he saw stars circling above the 9 heavens. The huge stars seemed to be right in front of him and within reach. In the horizon, there were 10 suns radiating with scorching light. On the other side, there were 10 great yins radiating with chilling light. These scenes truly illustrated what it meant to have a square sky and a square earth. Could this be the legendary immortal realm? Jiang Xi's throat moved. Astonishment. Beside him, Ku Luo chuckled when he saw Jiang Xi's expression. Anyone who came to the Tao Alliance heavenly court for the first time would have the same reaction. No one knows if this is the immortal realm, but I once heard from an uncle master in the sect. The continent where the Tao Alliance heavenly court is located is more than 100 light-years in length and width. Ku Luo sighed. 100 light-years. Jiang Xi was even more astonished. It was larger than 100 solar systems. The universe was indeed mysterious. Such a massive celestial body could not be explained by science. Senior brother, I've completed my mission, so I'll return to the sect first. I wish you success in your cultivation in the ancient Tao origin world. Ku Luo smiled. Thank you. Jiang Xi hurriedly expressed his gratitude. Then, Ku Luo activated the teleportation platform and left. Chapter 340. As he looked at the scenes that seemed like a paradise, the shock in Riverward's heart was unable to calm down for a long time. At the same time, more and more figures appeared on the Southern Heaven Gates teleportation platform as the geniuses arrived. It was everyone's first time in the Tao Alliance's heavenly court, and they were all shocked to see this. Jiang Xi, the junior brother who sent me here, said that the continent below is filled with all sorts of strange and mysterious places. There are all kinds of wondrous places, and even mortal countries. I really want to go down and take a look. Mu Ning looked around excitedly. I think you should give up on that idea as soon as possible. This place doesn't look simple. Jiang Xi shook his head. He looked around and saw that they were the only ones on the Southern Heaven Gates teleportation platform, and no one was guarding it. However, Jiang Xi's intuition told him that such an important place could not be left unguarded. As expected, after a while, all 3,600 geniuses arrived. One of the multicolored auspicious clouds in the sky floated down, and 3 figures appeared on the teleportation platform. 2 of them were Immortal Yi Liang and Immortal Chu He. The other person wore silver armor and held a halberd. He was obviously a general. Greetings, exalted Immortal. The geniuses bowed respectfully. Rise. Immortal Yi Liang smiled. Not bad. Looks like you haven't been relaxing in the past year. Many of you have improved. Since everyone is here, let's set off. After that, he looked at the silver-armored general. Thank you, divine general. The general's eyes flashed as he made a hand seal. The Southern Heaven Gates teleportation platform lit up with a dazzling light. The two immortals and 3,600 geniuses disappeared at the same time. In the next moment, everyone discovered that they were already in a magnificent hall. Is this the ancient Tao origin world? Someone asked. He asked the question on everyone's mind. Jiang Xi frowned slightly. It didn't seem like it. After observing for a while, he found that the floor of the hall was carved with countless complicated and terrifying runes. They were very profound. This is the Tao Alliance's Heavenly Court's Tao Origin Palace. The ancient Tao origin world and the origin universe belong to two different universes. Ordinary interstellar teleportation arrays are unable to reach that place. Only through the cosmic channel here can one enter that place, Immortal Yi Liang explained. The geniuses came to a realization. What you're about to experience is going to be even worse than what you experienced when you teleported to the Tao Alliance's Heavenly Court. Endure it. Immortal Yi Liang chuckled. He formed a hand seal with both hands, and the countless runes on the ground of the Tao Origin Palace lit up. Immediately after, the expressions of the 3,600 geniuses changed drastically. Even Ji Wei, who had always been cold, had a change in expression. This was because everyone could sense a strange distortion of space and time enveloping them. It was very unbearable. This time, not only did his body feel like it was being torn apart, even his soul felt like it was being torn apart. His entire body was being distorted along with time and space. Vaguely, Riverward could see that they were in a multicolored, twisted passageway. Both time and space were undergoing drastic changes. After an unknown period of time, everything calmed down. Many geniuses who had just finished vomiting vomited again. Jiang Xi's face turned pale. It was too unbearable. Immortal Yi Liang and Immortal Chu he watched from the side. When everyone had more or less recovered, Immortal Yi Liang, who had always played the good cop, smiled and said, "This is the ancient Tao origin world." In the next instant, cries of surprise rang out. Such dense spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Spiritual mist condensed from it can be seen everywhere. Look, the five-colored light in the sky is the Tao of heaven and earth. Amazing, truly amazing. My speed of comprehension has increased by dozens of times. The geniuses looked around with excitement. Jiang Xi also felt suffocated by the scene before him. However, he still maintained his usual vigilance and quickly observed his surroundings. He saw that they were currently on a huge platform that towered in the sky. The runes and formations on the surface of the platform were exactly the same as the ones in the Tao Origin Palace. When he looked down, he saw that there was a huge, majestic city below him. The platform was located at the edge of the city. At first glance, this huge city gave people the feeling that it had existed since the beginning of time, as if it had existed since time immemorial. The Tao of heaven and earth was faintly visible in the sky. It glowed with multicolored light and flowed slowly above the huge city like a river. As expected, it was visible to the naked eye. He looked into the distance. It was a gray and misty world, filled with various visible Daoist rhymes. They were accompanied by gray air currents that drifted with the wind. Moreover, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth here was extremely dense. In addition to the spiritual mist, he even saw spiritual liquid condensed from spiritual chi on a small mountain nearby. It formed a small waterfall and converged into a spiritual pool below. At this moment, Immortal Yi Liang said, "All right, stop being so surprised. All right, put away your surprise. You'll be cultivating here for 30 years. You'll have plenty of time to appreciate these. Now, I have a few requests for you." The 3,600 geniuses immediately calmed down. First, be obedient. Second, work hard on your cultivation. Thirdly, and this is the most important thing, survive. After 30 years, I hope that you will still be the same 3,600 geniuses. Not a single one of you will be missing. Immortal Yi Liang had a rare serious expression on his face. The group of geniuses also withdrew their relaxed attitudes, and their attitudes became solemn. They were here to cultivate, not to enjoy the scenery. After saying that, Immortal Yi Liang turned his gaze to the other side of the platform. A grey-robed old man was standing there silently. Immortal Yi Liang said respectfully, "Lord Emissary, I'll leave these youngsters to you. Don't worry." The grey-robed old man chuckled. Jiang Xi and the others were shocked. Only now did they notice the grey-robed old man. They hadn't sensed his existence at all. The grey-robed old man said, "Little guys, follow me." The 3,600 geniuses bowed to Immortal Yi Liang and Immortal Chu He before following the grey-robed old man and flying down to the huge city below. These two immortals were only here to send them off. They didn't have the right to cultivate in the ancient Tao origin world. Immortal Yi Liang asked, "How many do you think will die this time?" Immortal Chu He replied, "This batch is much stronger than the previous batches. About 20% will die. 20%? That's more than 700 people. If you want to become an expert, you don't just need talent. What's more important is your temperament and will." Jiang Xi and the other geniuses followed the grey-robed old man and landed in the huge city. They walked along a wide stone path towards the depths of the huge city. So many little guys came. Based on their cultivation and numbers, they should be the winners of the 9 Regions Genius Battle. 9 Regions Genius Battle. Speaking of which, I was just like them. I barely made it into the top 3,600. Sigh, more than 80,000 years have passed in the blink of an eye. Most of the people from my batch are already dead. Chapter 341. A loud voice came from the sky before fading away. They saw 3 immortals in battle armor flying over them. Their auras were even stronger than Immortal Yi Liang and Immortal Chu He. Jiang Xi and the others were speechless upon hearing their conversation. Tao integration cultivators usually had a lifespan of 10,000 years. Their lifespan would only increase after transcending the tribulation to become an immortal. Their lifespan would increase by 10,000 years after transcending a tribulation. Tribulation transcenders would only have a lifespan of 80,000 years after transcending the 7th tribulation. According to that immortal's words, someone who had lived for 80,000 years was at least an 8th tribulation transcender. Very strong. Jiang Xi, it seems that even the top 10 geniuses of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament aren't guaranteed to reach the immortal realm, Mu Ning said with a serious expression. The path of cultivation is accompanied by too many dangers. The slightest carelessness can lead to death. Jiang Xi nodded lightly. Just like his master, Daoist Ge. This genius who had been valued by the Purple Heavens sect as a Tao integration cultivator had died before becoming an immortal. At this moment, the other geniuses were also thinking about the words of the 3 immortals who had just passed by. They also thought of Immortal Yi Liang's final request, to survive. Everyone's heart sank at the thought of this. When everyone fell silent, the grey-robed old man introduced with a smile. "This is 9 Heavens City, the only city in the ancient Tao origin world. The ancient Tao origin world is jointly managed by the 3 schools and 6 sects. Apart from you little fellows, the humans of the 9 regions are the only ones in charge. Other cultivators who have contributed to the ancient Tao origin world will more or less receive some cultivation rights in the ancient Tao origin world. The humans who come here to cultivate will temporarily reside in 9 Heavens City during their cultivation period. The same goes for you for the next 30 years. You'll have to choose a residence. However, you must remember that there are many experts here, and most of them are immersed in cultivation. Don't disturb them, or you'll deserve to be killed." All the geniuses immediately fell silent. Looking at the 2 sides of the street, one could see that the interior of this ancient city was very simple. The buildings on both sides of the street were grey stone houses more than 3 meters tall. Only in the depths of 9 Heavens City could one see some taller buildings. At this moment, many powerful cultivators could be seen sitting cross-legged on the rooftops of the stone houses. They raised their heads and comprehended the way of heaven and earth that was visible to the naked eye. Because these experts were in the midst of cultivation, their bodies naturally emitted waves of powerful pressure. The geniuses were shocked and understood what the grey-robed elder meant. If they disturbed these experts, even if they were killed, they deserved it. That was indeed the case. The qualification to cultivate in the ancient Tao origin world was extremely precious. Moreover, time was limited. No one was willing to waste even a second. The geniuses carefully followed behind the grey-robed elder. Soon, they arrived in the depths of Nine Heavens City, in front of a crude palace. The palace was 1,000 meters tall and about 1,000 kilometers wide. It was also the largest building in the entire city. 3 ancient characters that were completely different from the common language of the Tao Alliance were carved onto the enormous signboard of the palace. However, the meaning of the ancient characters was clearly conveyed to everyone's minds. 9 Firmaments Palace. Jiang Ci pretended to be as shocked as everyone else, but his heart was in turmoil. Because these 3 ancient characters were too similar to the ones in the Jade Lake Secret Realm on Earth. The Jade Lake Secret Realm's Sky-Piercing Mountain and Sky-Piercing Tower had similar ancient characters on their steles. Jiang Ci had already imprinted these ancient characters in his mind. From the structure of the characters, it could be seen that they were from the same era. Nine Heavens Palace is the abode of Tao Lord Nine Heavens. Don't speak loudly after you enter, the grey-robed elder warned. Tao Lord Nine Heavens? The geniuses were shocked. Nine Heavens City, Nine Heavens Palace, and Tao Lord Nine Heavens. Nine Heavens City was the only city in the ancient Tao origin world. Tao Lord Nine Heavens' status was self-evident. Jiang Ci's gaze was also solemn. Immortals were divided into Tribulation Transcender, Tao Immortal, and Tao Ancestor. Immortals in the Tao Immortal stage were called True Immortals. For example, True Immortal Iron Mountain, whom they had met in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, was a Tao Immortal. And those who had the 2 words Tao Lord were Immortals of the Tao Ancestor stage. Tao Lord Nine Heavens. He must be a powerful cultivator who stood at the peak of the human race. However, why did the grey-robed elder bring them to the abode of such a powerhouse? One of the geniuses couldn't help but ask, Lord Emissary, why are we here? Haha, of course there are benefits. Since someone asked, there's no harm in telling you in advance. The grey-robed elder laughed. His eyes glowed as he said to everyone, you'll be able to obtain cultivation resources in the ancient Tao origin world. Not only is there heaven and earth spirit chi far denser than the original universe, but there's also heaven and earth Tao visible to the naked eye. More importantly, there are inheritances here that the original universe doesn't have. Inheritances? Everyone was shocked. Follow me. The grey-robed elder didn't give a direct answer. He led everyone into Nine Heavens Palace and walked along a stone path. Here, they saw many cultivators. When these cultivators saw the grey-robed elder, they all bowed respectfully and didn't say anything. When they left, they looked enviously at Jiang Ci and the other geniuses. Soon, they arrived at a side hall. There were dozens of simple and unadorned stone pillars in the hall, and they looked very ordinary. Lord Emissary, is this where the inheritances are? Someone asked. This is where the inheritances are chosen. The grey-robed elder shook his head with a smile. He then explained, there's only one reason why the human race can stand at the peak of the universe. It's because we value inheritances. Over the countless years, 44 pinnacle powerhouses have left their inheritances altars in Nine Heavens City to pass down their Tao arts. Pinnacle powerhouses, someone exclaimed. Then they remembered that they couldn't speak loudly here and hurriedly covered their mouths. Everyone was excited. What was a pinnacle powerhouse? Ji Wei, Yang Jiufeng, Mu Ning, and some other geniuses with extraordinary backgrounds naturally understood what this meant. The so-called pinnacle powerhouses of the human race were at least Tao Lords. Jiang Ci's breathing quickened. The further one went on the path of cultivation, the more obvious the importance of Tao arts became. Tao arts cultivation was like walking a path. The Tao of heaven and earth was only a minor Tao. If one followed the minor Tao, they would have a chance to step onto the great Tao. For example, a Tao Immortal Perfected Lord was a cultivator who had walked the complete Tao. A Tao Lord was a pinnacle powerhouse on the Tao. The Tao art inheritance left behind by such an expert was the guiding light for one to comprehend the Tao and cultivate. Although I have the experience panel, I still need to deduce and spend countless experience points to advance my Tao arts. If I have the guidance of these inheritances, the success rate of my deduction might be greatly increase. Jiang Xi quickly thought of this and became excited. Chapter 342. Just as everyone was feeling excited about the Tao arts of the peak experts, the old man continued to speak. Nine Heaven City has a total of 44 inheritance altars. Humans who come to the ancient Tao origin world for the first time can choose to cultivate. Regardless of whether you belong to the 3 gates or 6 sects, you can choose one of the altars to comprehend and cultivate. Each opportunity is limited to 10 days. Only 10 days. Yang Jiufeng was an impatient person. He immediately interrupted the grey-robed old man. The grey-robed old man didn't mind. He chuckled and said, 10 days is enough for little fellows like you. Just a glance at the Tao arts of the peak experts can benefit you greatly. It's like eating food. If you eat too much at once, it'll be useless if you can't digest it. The geniuses were enlightened. These stone pillars correspond to the 44 inheritance altars, and each of them contains a Tao art. You have an hour to use your spiritual sense to comprehend the Tao arts, and then choose an altar suitable for you. Now, let's begin. The grey-robed old man smiled again. 1 hour. Everyone didn't dare to waste any time and hurriedly observed the stone pillars. Jiang Xi looked at them one by one, and he could comprehend them with his spiritual sense. This is the moon ice altar. It was as if he had fallen into an illusion. He saw a cold moonlight sprinkle down between heaven and earth. Then he quickly came to his senses. It looks like the baleful yin energy, but it's at an extremely high level. Is it the baleful yin Tao? Or is it the baleful yin Tao? Jiang Xi didn't have time to think about this. He dispersed his thoughts and continued to look at the next pillar. Chaos Origin Altar, Nine Heavens Altar, Void Universe Altar, Azure Lotus Altar, Great Might Altar. He saw a gentle breeze blowing through these altars, and the spring wind and rain gave birth to all living things. He also saw a soaring sword intent tear through the sky and enter his mind. There was a wisp of flame that burned tenaciously. There was also a Buddhist light that illuminated the world. Soon, an hour had passed. Time's up. The old man's voice sounded. Everyone woke up from their observation and comprehension. All of them wished to continue, and their eyes were filled with desire. They had only comprehended a single Tao art from the stone pillars, and they had already gained something. How much would he gain from comprehending and cultivating at the inheritance altar? Line up properly. One by one, tell me your choice. The grey-robed elder smiled. I choose the everlasting altar. I choose the altar of the 9 firmaments. True mystic altar. The geniuses announced their choices one by one. Most of the 44 inheritance altars belonged to peak experts from the 3 gates and 6 sects. Some of them were directly named after the 9 sects. Of course, some weren't. For example, the inheritance altar from Sword's Gate, named the Green Lotus altar. Jiang Xi followed behind, deep in thought. He was making his final decision. Primordial Chaos, Heavenly Sun, Xin Hua, Green Lotus, 4 inheritance altars. The Primeval Chaos altar is a wind-type Tao art, the Heavenly Sun and Xin Hua are fire-type Tao arts, and the Green Lotus altar is a sword-type Tao art. It just so happens to correspond to the 3 great Taos that I cultivate, Gale, Parting Fire, and Sword Tao. Which one to choose? At present, his attainment in the Li Fire Tao was the highest. If he chose the Heavenly Sun Tao or the Torch altar, his progress would definitely be the fastest. After a moment, it was Jiang Xi's turn to announce his choice. Standing in front of the grey-robed elder, he said, I choose the Green Lotus altar. After some thought, Jiang Xi had a definite answer. His sword Tao was still at the Tao domain level. However, it was clear that the core of his Tao art had always been the sword Tao. Even the Tao fusion technique that he was able to use previously had the sword Tao as its core. After making his choice, Jiang Xi waited by the side. Mu Ning came over and asked, Jiang Xi, I chose the creation altar. What did you choose? Green lotus. Jiang Xi smiled gently. Oh, that's the inheritance altar of Sword's Gate. It's very powerful. It's a pity that there are very few peak experts who cultivate the life Tao. There's only one creation altar to choose from. Mu Ning was still a straightforward person, he continued. However, I listened carefully just now. Most people chose the purple firmament altar, followed by the Daoming altar. I don't know why. Jiang Xi's heart skipped a beat. The purple firmament altar was naturally left behind by the peak experts of the purple firmament sect. The Daoming altar was left behind by the peak experts of the Dao sect. Logically speaking, the Dao sect should be the number one sect. Why did most people choose the purple firmament altar? Was it because they were all disciples of the purple firmament sect? However, this choice did not limit one's sect status. I know this. I once heard from the elders in my family that our purple firmament sect's patriarch was once the number one expert of the Dao Alliance. Just as the two of them were puzzled, a woman's voice came from the side. They turned around and saw a girl in a red dress. She was the second place of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, Yang Jiufeng. Back then? Was it? Jiang Xi and Mu Ning had new doubts. I'm not sure about the details. Yang Jiufeng shook her head. Jiang Xi wanted to ask more questions, but the selection of the 3,600 geniuses had finished. The grey-robed elder smiled and said, I just said that each of you has one chance to comprehend the altar. Time is precious. Now, let's go to the inheritance altar and truly comprehend and cultivate. The geniuses' eyes immediately lit up. Soon, they arrived at a large hall in the Nine Clouds Palace. There was a row of tall stone doors in the hall. There were a total of 44 doors. On each stone door, there were ancient words that did not belong to this era. They indicated the location of the altar within the stone door. At the same time, a white-robed elder with a kind face was sitting cross-legged at the side of the hall. Lord Priest, I brought this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament's youngsters to the inheritance altar to cultivate. May I ask who is free? The grey-robed elder bowed respectfully. I knew that the youngsters were coming, so I'm free today. The white-robed priest smiled. The grey-robed elder smiled and looked at the geniuses. Thank the Lord Priest first, then go in and comprehend. Remember, you only have 10 days. Thank you, Lord Priest. The geniuses bowed in unison. Rise, rise. The white-robed priest nodded with a smile. He had a very good attitude towards the young geniuses of the human race. Then, the 3,600 geniuses entered the stone doors according to their respective inheritance altars. Mu Ning was very happy. He waved his hand at Jiang Xi and entered the creation altar first. Because he was the only one who cultivated the Tao of life, he was very relaxed. In comparison, there were too many geniuses who chose the purple firmament altar and the Tao name altar. One had 600 people, while the other had 500 people. There were not many people in the Azure Lotus altar, only 9. Most of the geniuses cultivated the Tao of heaven and earth of the 5 elements, followed by the Tao of time and Tao of space. Although there were many geniuses who used the sword, there were not many who had truly comprehended the Tao of sword. After all, the Tao of sword was a special Tao. Without talent, it was impossible to cultivate it. The best Tao was the one that suited oneself. These geniuses were not stupid. They would not blindly pursue the strongest Tao. Chapter 343. The 9 people who chose the Green Lotus altar, led by Jiang Xi, entered the stone door with the words Green Lotus engraved on it. What came into view was a huge inheritance altar. A sharp sword Dao Daoist rhyme filled the space. Everyone did not waste any time and quickly sat cross-legged on the altar. Jiang Xi took a deep breath in anticipation, closed his eyes, and connected his spiritual sense to the altar. Suddenly, his mind fell into the illusion of the Dao technique. A clear pond appeared in front of him. On the surface of the water, there was a green lotus swaying in the wind. As time passed, one green lotus became 4, then 100, 1,000, and 10,000. After 10,000, the number of green lotuses began to decrease again. 1,000, 100, 4, and 1. The cycle repeated, a total of 9 stages. It was very simple. However, Jiang Xi's mind was completely immersed in this simple process. Finally, a divine light flashed in his eyes, and 4 words appeared in his mind: green lotus as a sword. However, even though he knew these 4 words, he still could not figure it out. It was like knowing that 1 + 1 = 2, but not knowing why it equals 2. It was the same principle. Forget it, let's try the deduction effect first. Jiang Xi did not forget his previous idea. The Tao technique inheritance left behind by a peak powerhouse was a guiding light for enlightenment and cultivation. The deduction function of the experience points panel was also equivalent to a kind of enlightenment and cultivation. Now that he had the sword Tao inheritance in the green lotus altar as a reference, the deduction efficiency should be higher. Immediately, Jiang Xi thought in his heart under the reflection of the green lotus in the pond, use the sword domain to deduce once. After the deduction was completed, he carefully felt the changes in the Tao technique in his mind, and his eyes lit up. It's effective. Although the change was very subtle, he still noticed it with his sharp spiritual sense. The sword domain had a trace of shrinking and condensing. If there was a change, it meant there was an effect. In comparison, when he was deducing the sword domain in the original universe, there might not be a change even after thousands of deductions. Let's try the purple cloud sword manual and the sword domain together. River Word once again recited the deduction in his heart. After this deduction, he could not help but be excited. The effect is even more obvious. If the efficiency of the deduction was 10 times faster than before, then it was 100 times faster now. The effects of the violet firmament sword scripture had long been verified. When he first comprehended the true meaning of the sword, it was largely due to the deduction of the purple firmament sword scripture. Although the purple firmament sword scripture was a cultivation technique, the content of the technique was similar to the general outline of the sword Tao. It was of great help to his sword cultivation. At this rate, I'll probably succeed in 1 or 2 years. Thinking of this, Jiang Xi felt helpless. There wasn't enough time. These new geniuses only had one chance to comprehend the inheritance altar for free, and the time limit was 10 days. Jiang Xi didn't think too much about this problem. Time was precious. He would think about these things after this opportunity was over. Deduce. 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 As he carefully sensed the changes in the green lotus in the pool, he silently deduced in his heart. During this process, he couldn't feel the passage of time. All of the geniuses were completely immersed in the Tao arts of the inheritance altar. Time's up. The white-robed priest's voice sounded in everyone's mind. Instantly, everyone was startled awake from their deep comprehension. Is it over? The geniuses walked out of the stone door, feeling unsatisfied. Many of them looked at each other and felt the same. There was too little time. Only 10 days. Yang Jiufeng was an impatient person. As soon as she came out, she asked the grey-robed elder, Lord Emissary, what are the conditions for coming to the inheritance altar again? The other geniuses also looked over, wanting to know the answer. In a while, find a stone house to stay in, then use the communication pearl to enter the sky-piercing mountain river diagram. Recite the sky-piercing mountain again, and you'll know how to obtain the opportunity to comprehend it, the grey-robed elder said with a smile. The 9 regions genius competition was over. They could still enter the sky-piercing mountain river diagram? The geniuses were shocked. After the 9 regions genius competition, the Violet Firmament sect didn't take back their imprints. As for the participants who failed, their imprints were taken back. At this time, only River Word was endlessly shocked in his heart. But he maintained calm on the surface, and no abnormality could be discerned. Sky-piercing mountain. Before the 9 regions genius competition, he had heard of the sky-piercing mountain river diagram for the first time. Because of the eye of heaven, he didn't feel much. But now, hearing the 3 words sky-piercing mountain, Jiang Xi's heart could no longer remain calm. The Jade Lake mystic realm had a sky-piercing mountain, the exact same name. Even a ghost wouldn't believe that there was no relationship between the two. Then what was the relationship? Unfortunately, Jiang Xi had no one to ask the answer to this question. He wasn't stupid enough to say it out loud. Then, everyone followed the grey-robed elder and left Nine Clouds Palace. The grey-robed elder's mission to lead the way also came to an end. After the geniuses bowed and thanked him, they dispersed and went to find a place to stay. Jiang Xi didn't go too far. He searched nearby. After all, Nine Cloud City was very big. There were stone houses everywhere, and they were all of the same size. There was nothing to choose. The doors of these stone houses had to be refined with spiritual sense. He could tell at a glance if there were people or not. Jiang Xi quickly found an unoccupied stone house. After refining the stone door with his spiritual sense, he walked in. The living environment was still very simple and crude. The stone bed, stone table, and stone stool were all gone. It's a bit like cultivation. I came here to cultivate, not to enjoy. Jiang Xi took a deep breath and sat cross-legged on the stone bed. He took out his communication bead with a serious expression. Jade Lake's sky-piercing mountain. Dao Alliance's sky-piercing mountain. I'll know when I see it with my own eyes. Then, he scanned the communication bead with his spiritual sense and entered the sky-piercing mountain river diagram. It's the same place as the 9 Regions Genius competition. Jiang Xi looked around. It was still the same meteorite in the starry sky. Without hesitation, he said in his heart, "Sky-piercing mountain." Instantly, the river of stars spun. In the next moment, he found himself on a vast continent surrounded by starry skies. Jiang Xi could no longer maintain his composure. He was in disbelief. Looking ahead, he saw a mountain range that wasn't connected together not too far away. Those majestic mountains occupied a vast area. Their peaks seemed to pierce the heavens. In front of each mountain, there was a stone tablet with the following words engraved on it: Purple Firmament Sky-Piercing Mountain, Dao Name Sky-Piercing Mountain, Vast Frost Sky-Piercing Mountain. There were a total of 44 mountains. And these mountains looked exactly the same as Jade Lake's sky-piercing mountain. What was the connection? Chapter 344. Jiang Xi, there's no need to be so surprised, right? It's just a slightly taller mountain. Mu Ning's voice came from the side. Jiang Xi realized that many geniuses had already arrived at the foot of the mountain. Many of them were looking at him in confusion. They had already seen the shocking Dao Alliance Heavenly Court and ancient Dao Origin world. How could they be surprised by these mountains? I'm just surprised by the names of these mountains. Why are they the same as the inheritance altars? Do I have to climb these mountains to obtain the opportunity to learn from the inheritance altars? Jiang Xi chuckled. I'm also puzzled. The Lord Envoy didn't explain clearly just now, Mu Ning said. Yeah. Do we have to buy them? Or what? He didn't give us a definite answer, Yang Jiufeng added. The other geniuses, such as Kuang Lang, Mo Hong, Li Xianxian, Lin Ling and the others, also began to discuss. Only Ji Wei stood to the side, resting with his eyes closed. No one dared to barge in without permission. This was because a black-robed elder with a dignified face was sitting in front of the Skyspan Mountains. Seeing that everyone's attention had been diverted, Jiang Xi heaved a sigh of relief. He glanced at the black-robed elder and found that he wasn't moving either. Only then did he calmly observe the towering mountains not far away. With his current cultivation, he could easily determine the area, height, slope, and so on. And these data were exactly the same as the Skyspan Mountain on Earth. If there's a difference, it's that the Skyspan Mountain is real. And these Skyspan Mountains are in the Skyspan Mountain and River painting, so they're an illusion. But, is it really an illusion? Jiang Xi asked himself in his heart and sighed inwardly. No matter what, these secrets weren't something he could investigate with his current strength. Not long after, the 3,600 geniuses had all arrived. The black-robed elder sitting in front of the Skyspan Mountains suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, "Silence!" At the same time, a wave of pressure spread out. The geniuses were shocked. The grey-robed elder, the white-robed elder, and now the black-robed elder, none of them were simple. I'm in charge of guarding the Heavenspan Mountain. You can call me Lord Mountain Guardian, the black-robed elder said solemnly. Greetings, Lord Mountain Guardian. The geniuses bowed respectfully. The black-robed Lord Mountain Guardian was expressionless as he continued, "This is the first time all of you have come to Mount Tongtian. Let me give you a simple introduction. There are a total of 44 sky-piercing mountains, which coincide with the inheritance altar. If you wish to obtain the opportunity to comprehend the inheritance altar, the only way to do so is to challenge the Skyspan Mountain." Many people's eyes lit up with excitement. It turned out that it was just challenging the mountain. Once he succeeded, he would be able to obtain the opportunity to comprehend the inheritance altar. However, there were also a small number of people who frowned. They felt that things were not that simple. Jiang Xi's expression was also calm. Because he had seen the Jade Pool Heavenly Mountain, he would not underestimate this place. Whichever inheritance altar you choose, go challenge the corresponding sky-piercing mountain. There are guardians on the mountain. Every time you pass a level, you will get a chance to comprehend the inheritance altar. The black-robed Lord Mountain Guardian continued in a deep voice. Guardian. The excited geniuses quickly calmed down. The opportunity to comprehend the inheritance altar was incomparably precious. It was definitely not easy to obtain. However, there were still many people who were very confident. Don't think that it's simple. For countless years, very few people like you have been able to pass the first level on their first attempt. The Lord Mountain Guardian poured a bucket of cold water on the eager geniuses. They couldn't pass the first level? Almost everyone's expression changed. The Lord Mountain Guardian continued to introduce. The Skyspan Mountain has the most levels. It has a total of 32 levels. The second is the Skyspan Mountain, which has 31 levels. Then there are the Blue Lotus Mountain, True Mystic Mountain, Vast Cold Mountain, and so on. They all have 29 levels. These levels are related to the realm of the Tao. The higher the level, the more difficult it is. Under normal circumstances, the highest level a tribulation transcender can reach is the 10th level. If you can pass the 21st level, you will be a peak Tao Lord. When the Lord Mountain Guardian introduced this point, the 3,600 geniuses were shocked. They were all in disbelief. It turned out that a tribulation transcender could only pass the 10th level at most. If one could pass the 21st level, they would become a Tao Lord. In addition, the 44 Tao inheritances left behind by the peak powerhouses represent 44 different schools of thought. As long as a cultivator of each school can pass the 14th level of the Skyspan Mountain, they will be granted the same rights. Not only will they be able to live in Nine Heavens City permanently, but they can also come to the ancient Tao origin world to cultivate at any time. They will also be able to open their own schools in Nine Heavens City and accept disciples, and as long as you pass the 3rd level, you will be able to listen to the teachings of these powerhouses. If you are lucky, you might be able to become a disciple of one of these powerhouses. The Lord Mountain Guardian smiled and poured a bucket of cold water on them. Naturally, he had to give them more confidence. Sure enough, when the geniuses heard this, their eyes lit up with anticipation. Permanent residency in Nine Heavens City. Although they hadn't been in the ancient Tao origin world for long, they could already feel the unique cultivation environment here. If he could continue to cultivate here, his strength would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. Of course, everyone knew that the difficulty would be very, very high. Under normal circumstances, tribulation transcender powerhouses could only pass the 10th level. The 14th level was definitely beyond the tribulation transcender level. It had to be a Tao Immortal or Perfected Lord level powerhouse. And if they passed the 3rd level, they would be able to listen to the teachings of such powerhouses. It sounded easier. If they could become a disciple of a Perfected Lord level powerhouse, then their future cultivation path would be much easier. Not only would it be much easier, but they would also have a powerful backer. Only one person can pass each Skyspan Mountain at a time. Right now, Nine Heavens, Void Universe, True Mystic, Limitless, Blue Lotus, all of these Skyspan Mountains have people trying to pass them. Those who choose these Skyspan Mountains will have to wait for a while. As for the rest, line up and go up the mountain. The Lord Mountain Guardian's face became expressionless again. "I'll go first." A voice called out. The red-dressed girl, Yang Jiufeng, leaped up and flew toward the Skyspan Mountain. Instantly, many people followed her and flew toward the Skyspan Mountains that no one was trying to pass. The geniuses who were waiting in line all had the mentality of waiting for others to scout the path. They wanted to see how others passed. Soon, in less than 2 minutes, the geniuses who had flown out with Yang Jiufeng returned with bitter expressions. All of them had failed. Then, another group of people went to pass the Skyspan Mountain. However, most people's gazes were focused on the Skyspan Mountain that Yang Jiufeng was trying to pass. This was because Yang Jiufeng was ranked second in this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament. The rare Tao of Scarlet Flames that she had comprehended had already reached the 9th level. If she couldn't pass, then the others would be in trouble. Except for Ji Wei. Chapter 345. Jiang Ci, do you think Yang Jiufeng can pass? Mu Ning couldn't help but ask. Probably, maybe. I don't know. Jiang Ci smiled. What a load of nonsense. Mu Ning snorted. 5 minutes later, Yang Jiufeng flew back from the sky-piercing mountain. The lively girl in the red dress had a tense expression on her face. You didn't pass? Mu Ning asked. Sigh, it's too difficult. Yang Jiufeng smiled helplessly. Too difficult. Those words made the hearts of the geniuses sink. If even Yang Jiufeng said it was difficult, then they had even less of a chance. At this moment, the Lord Guardian shouted, "The Void Universe sky-piercing mountain is empty. Those who have chosen the Void Universe altar, go ahead." Whoosh! A figure flew out and attracted everyone's attention. It was Ji Wei. If even Ji Wei can't pass, then it's too difficult. Jiang Ci frowned. Those who weren't challenging the mountain were waiting for Ji Wei's result. At the same time, the geniuses who had gone to challenge the other sky-piercing mountains were also flying back. Basically, the time they spent was around 2 minutes, and they failed. 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, Ji Wei still hadn't come down. Ji Wei has passed the first stage. The Lord Guardian suddenly smiled. Everyone was shocked. Ji Wei was indeed strong. However, Ji Wei's success gave everyone hope. It wasn't impossible to pass the first stage. After another 10 minutes, the Lord Guardian smiled and said, as expected of a genius rarely seen in a million years. He has passed the second stage. Hiss, everyone wasn't shocked. They all sucked in a breath of cold air. Freak. Even the second place Yang Jiufeng couldn't pass the first stage. Ji Wei had actually passed the second stage. The gap was too big. Everyone felt the pressure. Even geniuses were divided into different levels. Ordinary, peak, peerless. They were only peak geniuses, but Ji Wei was a peerless genius. Even the lively Yang Jiufeng fell silent. Quang Lang, the third-place genius of the 9 Regions Genius Battle, had an ugly expression on his face. He had tried to challenge the sky-piercing mountain, but he had only lasted for 3 minutes before being defeated. Among the geniuses who had cleared the sky-piercing mountain, this time could be ranked third. But for the arrogant Quang Lang, he wouldn't allow himself to have such a big gap with others. Why? We're all in the top 3 of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, and we're all Purple Heaven Sect's 4th Heaven disciples, but he passed the first 2 tests. Quang Lang clenched his teeth. The other geniuses in the top 10, such as Mo Hong, Bloodchild, Li Xianxian, Lin Ling Ao, Feng Lu, and the others, wore complicated expressions. Jiang Ci and Mu Ning looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Another 3 minutes passed, and Ji Wei flew back from the Void Universe sky-connecting mountain expressionlessly. Upon closer inspection, one could see that his brows were slightly furrowed. He stopped at the third stage. After that, Ji Wei didn't linger any longer. His spiritual awareness left the painting and he went back to cultivate. Only then did the others who had cleared the Heavenspan mountain come to their senses. What was the point of wasting time here? With such a huge gap between them, what was the point of watching the show? He might as well cultivate. Instantly, the number of people decreased significantly. No one is challenging the Myriad Heavenspan Mountain and Green Lotus Heavenspan Mountain now, the Mountain Keeper's voice sounded. Jiang Xi was talking to Mu Ning and Yang Jiufeng. He was about to go over when he heard the voice. However, he discovered that another genius who cultivated the sword Dao had rushed out before him. Fine, I can observe the situation of the other 8 people. A total of 9 people chose the Green Lotus altar. Jiang Xi didn't insist on who went first. Jiang Xi, Yang Jiufeng, I'm going too, Mu Ning said with a determined gaze. Good luck. Good luck. Jiang Xi and Yang Jiufeng said. Then, Mu Ning flew towards the Myriad Heavenspan Mountain. After 5 minutes, Mu Ning still hadn't come out. On the contrary, the 8 sword Dao geniuses who went to challenge the Green Lotus Heavenspan Mountain failed in succession within 5 minutes. At this speed, they came back down almost as soon as they went up. Looking at the time, Mu Ning should be passing the first round. Jiang Xi took a deep breath and was about to fly towards the Green Lotus Heavenspan Mountain. Just then, he heard the Mountain Keeper say with a smile, "This year's geniuses are not bad. Mu Ning has also passed the first round." Fuck. Jiang Xi directly used the Gale Domain and accelerated towards the Green Lotus Heavenspan Mountain. Everyone had a competitive heart. Even the most Buddhist-like people were no exception. No genius would admit defeat easily. The other geniuses' expressions changed drastically. They were even more shocked than when they heard that Ji Wei had passed the first 2 rounds. Because Ji Wei's talent and strength far exceeded theirs, and Mu Ning wasn't in the top 3 of the 9 regions' genius battle. At this moment, Quang Lang's eyes flickered. It wasn't jealousy, but competitiveness. He was in the top 3 of the 9 regions' genius battle. Why? Jiang Xi also went to challenge the first round. I only lasted 3 minutes in the first round. He should also be in the same time. Quang Lang took a deep breath. He wanted to see the results of Jiang Xi's challenge. This was because he had fought with Jiang Xi in the 9 regions Genius Battles arena battles. At that time, the 2 of them were about the same strength. It was only because he had the advantage of the terrain that he defeated Jiang Xi in the end. Not far away, Yang Jiufeng was closer to Mu Ning and Jiang Xi because of her relationship with them. After the challenge, she didn't leave the sky-piercing mountain and river painting because she wanted to see the results of the 2. Mu Ning looks innocent, but is hiding a lot of things. Jiang Xi's strength is about the same as Quang Lang's. He probably won't be able to pass the first round, she thought to herself. The other top 10 geniuses didn't leave either. Everyone had a competitive spirit and was unwilling to admit defeat. My Ignis Dao is already perfected. Among so many geniuses, my Dao technique strength is definitely in the top 3. I don't believe I can't pass. With this thought in mind, Jiang Xi quickly arrived at the majestic Green Lotus Skyreach Mountain. There was a stone tablet at the foot of the mountain. It was very similar to the stone tablet at the Jade Lake Skyreach Mountain. It was also engraved with ancient words that didn't belong to this era. The content was instantly transmitted to Jiang Xi's mind. Green Lotus Skyreach Mountain. Attached, point reward rules. The first round rewards 100 points. The second round rewards 200 points. The third round rewards 400 points. The fourth round, so on and so forth. The points reward would be doubled for every additional round passed. For young geniuses who have just entered the ancient Dao origin world to cultivate, they will receive 10 times the points reward for 30 years. In order, 1,000 points, 2,000 points, 4,000 points. The information on the stone tablet made River Word pleasantly surprised. Points. 1 point was equivalent to 100 supreme-grade spirit crystals. After spending once in the Purple Heaven Sex Treasure Pavilion, he realized the importance of points. He could buy many things in the Purple Heaven Sex Treasure Pavilion that couldn't be bought in the outside world. For example, the Origin Awakening Spirit Pearl that he needed to refine his clone was very difficult to buy in the outside world. Chapter 346. Passing the sky-piercing mountain in the newbie stage would give 10 times the points reward. Passing the first stage would give 1,000 points, which was equivalent to 100,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals. This was already the same as the spirit crystal reward for the top 3 in the 9 regions genius battle. From the point reward, one could see how difficult the sky-piercing mountain was. Among so many young geniuses, only Ji Wei and Mu Ning had passed the second and first stages respectively. The difficulty was obvious. Pass the mountain. Jiang Xiai's eyes were firm. Whether it was difficult or not, he would pass it first. It might seem like a long process, but it actually took less than a breath's time to go through the information on the stone tablet. Looking up, one could see that there was a stone staircase on the Green Lotus sky-piercing mountain that led to the top of the mountain. There was a platform at every interval of the stone staircase. Jiang Xiai walked up the stairs. The first platform was the first stage. In the depths of Nine Heavens City, other than the 1,000-meter-tall Nine Heavens Palace, there were many other palaces. Additionally, there were also quite a number of palaces, 100 meters tall, surrounding Nine Firmaments Palace. Those were the grotto mansions of some human experts. At this moment, a woman in green flew into one of the palaces on her sword. "Brother Zhongli, don't sleep anymore. Come down and see me." The woman in green frowned and shouted from below a pavilion. "Sai, Ping I'll call you sister, okay? I've only slept for 300 years. 300 years. You woke me up." A helpless voice sounded from within the pavilion. A young man with long, messy hair and a slovenly appearance walked down from the pavilion. His clothes were unbuttoned, and he held a wine gourd in his hand. "What's the matter?" His eyes were wandering. "No matter what, you were once the famous wine sword immortal in the other realms. Now, you only know how to sleep all day." Immortal Ping had a look of disappointment on her face. "If you have something to say, say it. If not, I'm going upstairs." Wine Sword Immortal was clearly impatient. "The new 9 regions Genius Battles youths are all here. 9 of them have chosen our Green Lotus sect. Come with me." Immortal Ping stated her intentions boring. "I'm not going." Wine Sword Immortal raised his gourd and took a sip, as if he was hiding something. Immortal Ping sighed in her heart. She knew that her words had poked at Wine Sword Immortal's sore spot. Because the Wine Sword Immortal Zhongli and his Dao companion, Lian Rong, had met each other during the 9 regions genius battle. And now, the Wine Sword Immortal was still here, but his Dao companion was gone. This great change caused the Wine Sword Immortal, who had dominated the 9 regions and slaughtered the immortal Dao experts of the 10,000 races in the extraterritorial battlefield, to fall into depression until today. Immortal Ping was very clear that it had already been 50,000 years. If the Wine Sword Immortal did not resolve the demonic barrier in his heart, he would not be able to break through. A 9th Tribulation Transcender had a lifespan of 100,000 years at most. If Wine Sword Immortal does not break through, his lifespan will be depleted. "Sister Rong, I really have no other choice." Immortal Ping muttered to herself. For the past 50,000 years, in order to help the Wine Sword Immortal break the demonic barrier in his heart, she had thought of all sorts of ways but had never succeeded. Every time the 9 regions genius tournament's young people came to 9 Heavens City, she would try to get Wine Sword Immortal to go out and take a look. With this in mind, Immortal Ping advised again, "Leave quickly. The Sword Dao's Green Lotus lineage is now relying on you to hold up the facade. You are already able to take charge of an area on your own." Wine Sword Immortal raised his gourd and drank again. "In the world of mortals with a sword, only wine can resolve my desires." At the same time, he hummed an off-key song and was about to go upstairs. "Hey! No more wine." He suddenly stopped in his tracks and shook his wine gourd, frowning. "Why is there no wine now?" He pinched his fingers and divined, but found nothing. But the feeling of sudden inspiration was extremely obvious. This was a situation that had never happened in the past 50,000 years. "Oh well, let's go." Wine Sword Immortal regained his unrestrained self and laughed. "I can go with you to take a look, but after that, you have to get me 100,000-year-old moon frost wine." 100,000-year-old moon frost wine? You better go back to sleep." Immortal Ping stared with her eyes wide open. "Haha." Wine Sword Immortal laughed loudly. Then, with a thought, Their spiritual awareness entered the sky-piercing mountain river painting. In the sky above the vast continent where the sky-piercing mountain was, the two figures were hidden in the starry sky. They were looking at the green lotus sky-piercing mountain. How are the young people this year? Wine Sword Immortal asked. There is a genius called Ji Wei, who is said to be hard to come by in 1,000,000 years. Just now, he challenged the Void Universe sky-piercing mountain and passed 2 rounds consecutively. Immortal Ping replied. That is an extraordinary person, who knows, he might become a great Tao immortal in the future. Wine Sword Immortal was surprised. He asked again, what about those who chose the Green Lotus altar? There are 9 people, I have already sent a message to the Mountain Guardian, the first 8 people have already failed. Now, the one who is challenging the mountain is called Jiang Ci. It is said that he has a slight chance of passing the first round. Oh, let me take a look. Wine Sword Immortal raised his wine gourd and was about to drink when he remembered that there was no wine left. In the end, he could only helplessly shake his head and look at the Green Lotus sky-piercing mountain. Green Lotus sky-piercing mountain, Jiang Ci walked along the stone steps and quickly reached the first platform. This place was empty and did not seem to be dangerous. But then, the space changed and he fell into an illusion. In the illusory space, there was an endless mountain range. At this time, Jiang Ci was standing in the air. In front of him, there was a figure standing with a sword on his back. It was a middle-aged man wearing battle armor, exuding the powerful aura of immortal realm. Guardian, immortal. It would be strange if he could pass. Jiang Ci's expression changed abruptly. As for the gatekeeper, he frowned, another original infant stage brat. Then, his aura suddenly decreased. His cultivation quickly fell to perfected nascent soul stage, the same as Jiang Ci. Challenger, my cultivation will remain the same as yours, but my Dao technique is different. My Dao technique will remain at the first level of sword intent, the Guardian said in a deep voice. Jiang Ci's expression eased a little, but when he heard the following words, his expression changed again. First level of sword intent. Saber Dao, Sword Dao, Spear Dao, and Axe Dao. These 4 special Dao techniques were somewhat different from the common 5 elements, time, and space Dao techniques. Under normal circumstances, after cultivating Dao techniques to the Dao of heaven and earth, the next level would be the Great Dao realm. And the next level after saber, sword, spear, and axe was Dao intent. Therefore, above Sword Dao was sword intent. According to the spiritual power amplitude, the maximum amplitude of Sword Dao level 10 was 2,000 times. Then sword intent level 10 was 20,000 times. To be more specific, the spiritual power amplitude of sword intent level 1 was 3,800 times. What's there to play? Jiang Ci's eyes widened. His Dao of Fire level 10 had a spiritual power amplitude of 1,000 times. But it was only 1,000 times. With such a big difference, there was no way to fight at all. The gatekeeper didn't even need to use a sword. A single fist was enough to kill him. Don't worry, according to the rules, the difficulty of each level is the same. My current Dao technique strength is equivalent to the first level of an ordinary Great Dao, the Guardian said again. Jiang Ci heaved a sigh of relief. But Chapter 347. In terms of the Dao of heaven and earth, the cultivation of Dao techniques was divided into 3 levels: special, rare, and ordinary. When a Daoist technique entered the Great Dao level, it was only divided into special and ordinary. This was because there were thousands of Daoist techniques, but there were only 36 Great Daos. The cultivation before the Great Dao was naturally special and rare Daoist techniques, which had a higher chance of stepping onto the Great Dao than ordinary Daoist techniques. The limit of an ordinary Great Dao is 10,000 times, and the first realm is 1,900 times. I'm 1,000 times, and the difference is less than 2 times. How can I fight? Jiang Ci took a deep breath. It was too difficult. No wonder he had failed all his previous attempts. However, you should know that Sword Dao focuses on killing. Even if it only has the power of an ordinary first-level Great Dao technique, it's still much stronger than ordinary Great Dao techniques. In terms of attack power, It is also much stronger than other ordinary great Daos. Are you ready? The gatekeeper's deep voice sounded again. Jiang Xi's eyes narrowed. Let's begin. Admit defeat. That was impossible. Buzz. The sound of a sword rang out. At the same time, the aura of a sword domain suddenly condensed on Jiang Xi's sword. Are all the sword Dao cultivators of the human race so weak now? The gatekeeper whispered. Swoosh. A soaring sword intent emanated from the long sword behind him and soared into the sky. Although he maintained his cultivation base at the perfected nascent soul realm, his current Daoist technique strength was at the tribulation immortal realm. The gatekeeper would not show mercy and instantly attacked. The sword was unstoppable, directly piercing through space and stabbing towards Jiang Xi. Boom. However, a layer of fire and wind condensed on Jiang Xi's sword. The Dao of Fire and the Gale Domain. This was not a fusion technique, but 3 Daoist techniques at the same time. He also cultivated other Daoist techniques. The gatekeeper's expression turned cold. Boom. Boom. The 2 swords instantly clashed. The 3 Daoist techniques collided with the pure sword intent. A powerful aura erupted and swept through the mountain range. Mountain peaks crumbled one after another. Bang! At the end of the first exchange, Jiang Xi was directly sent flying and smashed into a 10,000-meter tall mountain. Suddenly, half of the mountain exploded, and the mountain collapsed. Your Dao technique strength isn't bad. If you go to other Heavenspan mountains, you can clear the first round. But here, you're still far from enough. The gatekeeper said in a deep voice. Don't look down on me. Jiang Xi rushed out from the rubble below and slashed at the gatekeeper. Clang. The 2 of them exchanged blows again. River Word had always been at a disadvantage. His current spiritual energy amplitude was only 1,000 times. However, by using 3 Daoist techniques at the same time, he was able to hold on. Unfortunately, I'm unable to utilize the Dao fusion technique, otherwise, I'd surely kill him. Jiang Xi retreated repeatedly. They could only passively defend. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. The gatekeeper was also somewhat surprised. His current strength was already equivalent to that of a first tribulation transcender. Jiang Xi had actually waited for so long. Moreover, he realized that Jiang Xi's use of Dao techniques was very exquisite. Sword Domain, Gale Domain, Li Fire Dao. Although it was not a fusion of Daos and Dharma, each had their own division of labor and coordination. Let's end this. The gatekeeper slashed again and forced Jiang Xi to retreat thousands of kilometers. This time, he took advantage of the fact that Jiang Xi was exhausted and used his sword intent to sweep the area. The gap is still too big. Jiang Xi felt helpless. He had failed to pass the round. In the starry sky, Wine Sword Immortal Zhongli and Immortal Ping saw everything. Immortal Ping sighed and said, "What a pity. His talent in fire-type Daoist techniques is much stronger than his talent in the Dao of the Sword. It seems that there is no hope for the youngsters who chose the Green Lotus lineage this time." "No, Ping you're mistaken." Wine Sword Immortal showed a rare serious expression. "Mistaken?" Immortal Ping was puzzled. "This youngster is very pure." "No, it should be said that his Dao of the Sword is very pure. Although it's still at the sword domain level, it's not mixed with anything else." Wine Sword Immortal's gaze was deep pure. Immortal Ping was even more puzzled. She was also a 7th Tribulation Transcender who practiced the Dao of the Sword. However, she had never heard of someone who practiced the Dao of the Sword being pure. However, she knew that although Wine Sword Immortal was still a Tribulation Transcender, his Daoist techniques had already reached the realm of sword intent. His understanding of the sword was higher than hers, so there was definitely a reason for his words. Wine Sword Immortal explained, "Humans have 7 emotions and 6 desires, and cultivators are no exception. When comprehending the Dao, one's Daoist techniques will be mixed with all kinds of emotions. Happiness, anger, sorrow, fear, hostility, evil, madness, ethereal, carefree, peaceful, and so on. As for this youngster Jiang Xi, his Daoist techniques don't have any emotions, and are extremely pure. If he can maintain such a pure Daoist technique, The bottleneck of his Daoist techniques in the future will be much smaller. Wine Sword Immortal sighed softly. His current bottleneck was brought about by his emotions. Although he knew it, he couldn't break it. In that case, Jiang Ci is very suitable for the Tao of the Sword. Immortal Ping's eyes lit up. Couldn't be more suitable. Wine Sword Immortal laughed, completely unrestrained. Then, he said with a solemn expression, Ping I'm preparing to teach the Tao of the Sword in 9 Firmament City. Help me spread the word. That's great. Immortal Ping immediately smiled, very happy. Then, she suddenly thought of something and said with a frown, Big Brother Zhongli, are you so sure that this youngster Jiang Ci will be able to reach the Tao of the Sword? Can this youngster pass the 3rd trial of the Green Lotus Sky-Piercing Mountain in 30 years? Saber, sword, spear, and axe are the most difficult Daoist techniques to cultivate. Wine Sword Immortal chose to teach the Tao of the Sword at this time because he was targeting Jiang Ci. The youngsters of the 9 Regions Genius Competition could only pass the 3rd trial of the Sky-Piercing Mountain. Only then would they be qualified to listen to the lectures of the Tribulation Transcender Powerhouses in 9 Firmament City, and then the Tribulation Transcender Powerhouses would accept them as disciples. Of course, there was an exception, and that was powerhouses above the true monarch level, who didn't need to follow this rule. Let's go back and talk about it. Wine Sword Immortal smiled gently, a trace of spirit hidden in his eyes. He still had a piece of information that he didn't reveal, and that was that Jiang Ci's sword Tao was too similar to his Tao partner Ronger's sword Tao. They were both very pure. It was just that Jiang Ci's sword Tao was a bit purer. But no matter what, as long as it was similar, there was hope in his heart. The 2 figures disappeared into the starry sky of the Sky-Piercing Mountain river painting. Below, on the vast land where the Sky-Piercing Mountain was located, the black-robed old man guarding the mountain looked up at the starry sky where the 2 were and sighed softly. The other geniuses were already discussing at this time. Jiang Ci has already been in the trial for 5 minutes. Is he going to pass the first trial? It's hard to say. Among the top 10, only Ji Wei and Mu Ning passed the first trial. Even the 2nd place Yang Jiufeng and the 3rd place Quang Lang failed. Look, he came out. The mountain guard didn't say that he passed the first trial. He failed. Many geniuses let out a sigh of relief. If Jiang Ci passed it again, the blow would be too great. Quang Lang clenched and unclenched his fists. Others didn't care, but he did. Because Jiang Ci had lasted for 5 minutes on the Sky-Piercing Mountain, far exceeding his 3 minutes. Comparing the 2, it meant that Jiang Ci's Tao strength had far surpassed his. 1, 2, 3, they're all monsters, Yang Jiufeng muttered. Then, he said to Mu Ning, I'm leaving first. Mu Ning tilted his head and knocked on his straw hat with his bamboo flute. Only a year had passed, and Jiang Ci's improvement was beyond his expectations. In the end, all 3,600 geniuses had finished challenging the mountain. Only Ji Wei passed the 2nd trial, and Mu Ning passed the 1st trial. The others all failed. The ones who lasted the longest were Yang Jiufeng and Jiang Ci. The competition began from this moment onwards. The other top 10 geniuses became even more hardworking. This was also a scene that the human race experts were happy to see. Only through competition could there be improvement. However, a piece of news spread among the geniuses the next day, causing a sensation. Chapter 348. 9 Heavens City, inside Jiang Ci's stone house. Mu Ning was taken in as a disciple by a perfected cultivator. Jiang Ci held his communication bead in shock. This guy couldn't keep a secret. He had just sent a message to show off to him. He had been taken in as a disciple by a perfected cultivator in 9 Heavens City and was about to pay him a visit. Fuck. A perfected cultivator. Jiang Ci still couldn't express his shock. A perfected cultivator was a Tao immortal expert who had completed a great Tao. When a Tao immortal was invisible, a perfected cultivator could do whatever he wanted. If Mu Ning was taken in as a disciple by such an expert, he would have a chance to step onto the great Tao in the future. Jiang Ci was shocked and fell into deep thought. Ji Wei didn't have a perfected cultivator to take in a disciple, but Mu Ning got a master first. Why is that? And a perfected cultivator has an endless lifespan. If it's not necessary, they rarely take in disciples. Looks like everyone has secrets. Ji Wei has secrets, so does Mu Ning. Even Yang Jiufeng, Kuang Lang, Bloodchild, and the others have secret. Thinking of this, he smiled. Others had secrets, so did he. Envy aside, I have the experience panel. I'll catch up sooner or later. Jiang Ci wasn't the only one who was shocked and confused. All the geniuses were the same. Even Ji Wei was agitated by this. He went straight to the inheritance altar and used one of the 2 chances he had just received. No one wanted to fall behind others. This was especially true for the prideful geniuses. At the same time, in the primal universe, Purple Heaven Sect's 6th heaven, a majestic palace sat on the peak of a towering mountain surrounded by stars. Iron Mountain perfected cultivator in blood-red armor sat on top of the palace. As for Immortal Iliang and Immortal Chuhe, they were standing respectfully below. Greetings, perfected cultivator. How did the youngsters of this batch do? Iron Mountain perfected cultivator's hoarse voice sounded. Immortal Iliang said respectfully, only Ji Wei and Mu Ning passed the 2nd stage of the Void Universe Sky Mountain and the 1st stage of the All Things Sky Mountain. Not bad. What about the others? Jiang Ci and Yang Jiufeng were able to pass the 1st stage within 3 years. True Lord Iron Mountain pondered for a moment before nodding. You may leave first. Immortal Iliang and Immortal Chuhe hurriedly took their leave. In the empty hall, perfected Lord Iron Mountain pondered for a long time as he looked ahead with a deep gaze. From his position, he could see the flow of the galaxy. Kuan Yu spends most of his time in seclusion in the heavenly court of the Tao Alliance. Why would he notice a young fellow who hasn't even reached the Tao merge? True Lord Iron Mountain frowned. After becoming a Tao immortal, one could live as long as the heavens if one did not encounter any calamities or tribulations. As for True Lord Kuan Yu, he was a Tao immortal expert who had lived for countless years. She knew more secrets than he did. So what if I'm recruiting disciples? This year's geniuses are all under my Iron Mountain, 9 Heavens City, Wine Sword Immortal's residence. Wine Sword Immortal and Immortal Ping were watching a battle. It displayed the scene of Mu Ning challenging the 1st stage of the Myriad Heavenspan Mountain. Big brother Zhongli, can you see anything? Why would True Lord Kuan Yu accept him as a disciple? Immortal Ping turned her head and asked. Wine Sword Immortal sleepily said, I can't see anything either. However, this young fellow's eyes are as pure as Jiang Ci's sword. The eyes are the windows to the soul. It's rare to see someone who can still maintain a pure heart after cultivating for hundreds of years. The two were somewhat puzzled. Tao immortals like True Lord Kuan Yu, who had endless lifespans, would not easily accept disciples. This was because if they did not cause trouble, they would not die and would not need to pass on their mantle. Instead, tribulation transcenders like them who were nearing the end of their lifespans would often accept disciples. It seems that this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament is the strongest in the past million years. Not only is there Ji Wei, but there's also Mu Ning, Immortal Ping said. What? Are you looking down on that young fellow who cultivates the Tao of the Sword? Wine Sword Immortal drank another mouthful of wine. Immortal Ping smiled and said, how can I look down on someone that Big Brother Zhongli thinks highly of? I just feel that he's still a little lacking compared to Ji Wei and Mu Ning. A little lacking? That's because there's no one guiding him. Geniuses like Ji Wei and Mu Ning not only have high attainments in the Tao, but they are also very skilled in using it. It's obvious that there's someone guiding them behind the scenes. In comparison, although Jiang Ci's attainment in the Tao is also high, his actual use is a bit shallow. The gap between theory and practice is not small. Wine Sword Immortal shook his head lightly. What does Big Brother Zhongli mean? I have to give him some pointers. It's not easy for the Green Lotus lineage to have such a good seedling. Those Sword Tao perfected lords might not like him, but I do. Immortal Ping smiled and shook her head. He had not even accepted a disciple, but he already regarded her as his master. But then again, I originally wanted to teach him a technique and create a sensation this time, but someone else beat me to it. Although Wine Sword Immortal said this, his expression was very indifferent, as if he did not care at all. Immortal Ping smiled and said, "Don't worry, you are the dignified Wine Sword Immortal. In terms of fame, you are not inferior to true Lord Kuan Yu." The news that Mu Ning had been accepted as a disciple by a perfected lord quickly spread. A group of young geniuses stirred up a frenzy of cultivation competition. Jiang Xi was naturally also focused on cultivation. Although he was not at the inheritance altar, he still had to continue his deduction. He activated his sword domain and gale domain at the same time. However, he clearly felt that the efficiency of his sword Dao deduction had decreased by 100 times. It would be great if I could sit on the green lotus altar and cultivate every day. Jiang Xi looked forward to it. If others cultivated at the altar for a long time, they might suffer from indigestion. He did not need to worry about that. He only needed the Dao technique inheritance at the inheritance altar as a reference to continue his deduction. Unfortunately, dreams were too far away from reality. The difficulty of challenging the sky-piercing mountain was too high. Oh! At that moment, Jiang Xi discovered that someone had sent him a message. Is it Dudu? He smiled. He had spent 10 days here, but more than a month had passed in the original universe. It's not him. Who is Wine Sword Immortal? Jiang Xi scanned it with his spiritual perception and discovered that it was an unfamiliar transmission mark. Furthermore, it was a message. Ever since the 9 Regions Genius Tournament ended, all kinds of invitations had flooded in. For peace and quiet, he had changed his transmission mark. Now, only a few friends and family, as well as Purple Heaven Sect's Immortal Yi Liang, knew his transmission mark. As for this Wine Sword Immortal, he had never heard of him. However, this name did not sound simple. He was definitely a tribulation transcender. Jiang Xi checked the message with doubts. I'm Wine Sword Immortal. When you challenged the sky-piercing mountain yesterday, I watched from above. Your sword Dao is not bad, and you should continue to maintain it. However, you're not very good at the practical application of Dao techniques. I suggest you systematically learn the basic knowledge of sword Dao application. Our Purple Heaven Sect's treasure pavilion has the tune of 10,000 swords. It's a cultivation technique that explains the basic application of the Green Lotus sword Dao. You can buy it and learn it. Also, go look for the stone house in the North 9th district of Nine Heavens City. The Dao runes there will be helpful to you. Chapter 349. It was a simple message, but it pointed out the problem and gave a solution. It was like an elder giving advice to a junior. After reading it, Jiang Xi was shocked and fell into deep thought, recalling his battles in recent years. Even though I have experienced a lot of battles in the 9 Regions Genius Battle, in terms of practical application of Dao techniques, I am still inferior. Compared to other geniuses who have cultivated for hundreds or thousands of years, I am indeed much worse. This was a problem that was difficult to avoid. He could use the experience points to increase his Dao technique realm. However, combat experience was accumulated through countless battles. The problem was that he had only cultivated for less than 50 years. To be specific, it was less than 30 years. Judging from his tone, Wine Sword Immortal is an immortal of the Purple Heaven Sect. Since he is named Sword Immortal, his sword Dao strength must not be bad. I have to pay attention to the problem pointed out by such an expert. With a thought, Jiang Xi entered the Purple Heaven Sect board in the Eye of Heaven network through his communication bead. He was now a level 3 disciple of the Purple Heaven Sect, so he naturally had the authority to access this place. A 3-dimensional phantom appeared in the stone house. Search for Wine Sword Immortal. Suddenly, the phantom changed, and a large number of images, pictures, and text information appeared. Jiang Xi quickly read with his spiritual sense. After a moment, only surprise was left on his face. There is actually such a person. According to the information he could find, this was a 9 Tribulations sword immortal who had once shocked the 9 regions. 50,000 years ago, he joined forces with another tribulation transcender to kill and seriously injure a Tao immortal of the demon race. Tribulation transcenders and Tao immortals were on two completely different levels. One had an end to their lifespan, the other had an endless lifespan. It was almost impossible to fight above one's level. Battle achievements were one thing. On the other hand, Wine Sword Immortal was a heroic and righteous person, famous for being unrestrained. Back then, he was the most popular immortal in the entire 9 regions of the Tao Alliance. However, for some unknown reason, after that battle 50,000 years ago, the Wine Sword Immortal disappeared without a trace. He paid attention to the battle when I challenged the sky-piercing mountain. Is he living in seclusion in 9 Heavens City? Jiang Xi's heart moved. It is an honor for such an expert to personally guide me. Jiang Xi smiled and said again, enter the Purple Heaven Sect's treasure pavilion. The 3D illusion changed, and a virtual shopping mall appeared. Search for the melody of 10,000 swords. Information about a cultivation method appeared in front of Jiang Xi. Tune of 10,000 swords, 88 points, basic application of the Green Lotus Sword Doctrine, restricted to disciples of the first sky and above. Were the basic manuals so expensive? Jiang Xi was dumbfounded. He had thought that it would only cost 1 or 200 top-grade spiritual crystals. 88 points. Wouldn't that be 8,800 top-grade spiritual crystals and 8 billion low-grade spiritual crystals? Then he checked his account balance, 998 top-grade spiritual crystals. Lack of money, Jiang Xi shook his head helplessly. He had used up almost all of the 10,000 top-grade spirit crystals he had received from the 9 Zones Genius Battle to create his doppelganger. Wine Sword Immortal also mentioned Tao rune carvings. I wonder what they are? His luck was not bad. With his current authority, he had successfully found the Tao rune inscriptions in the Eye of Heaven network. After reading it, Jiang Xi was pleasantly surprised. Good stuff. Many experts who cultivated in 9 Heavens City liked to comprehend the Tao of heaven and earth on the rooftops. Some experts would casually carve their understanding of Tao onto the roof when they were cultivating Tao techniques so that those who came after them could refer to them. And some later generations would add their own insights to the rooftops, which led to more and more Tao rune carvings on the rooftops. In Jiang Xi's view, wasn't this equivalent to a weaker version of the inheritance altar? Because the experts who cultivated in 9 Heavens City were not only those who had yet to become immortals, but also many immortal path expert. The Tao rune carvings they left behind were definitely not simple. The only drawback was that these Tao rune carvings were rather messy, unlike the Tao technique inheritance on the inheritance altar, which was very complete and systematic. It doesn't matter to me whether it's messy or not, as long as it can be used as a reference for deduction. Jiang Xi's eyes lit up. Thinking of this, he got up and went out, ready to go to the stone house that Wine Sword Immortal had mentioned to look for the Tao rune carvings there. After coming out, Jiang Xi found that Yang Jiufeng, Mo Hong, Bloodchild, Quang Lang and the other geniuses were already searching the empty rooftops of the stone houses. Are they all looking for the Tao rune carvings? Jiang Xi sighed. These extraordinary geniuses were more well-informed than him, who came from an ordinary background. Fortunately, Wine Sword Immortal had reminded him, otherwise he would have fallen behind the others. Even if he found out from the other geniuses later, he would be much later than the others. Time was precious. Then, Jiang Xi went straight to the stonehouse at North 9th Stonehouse in Section C. His figure was also noticed by Yang Jiufeng and the others. Jiang Xi, he also knows about the existence of the Tao rune carvings. Many people's eyes flashed. Back then, my strength was almost the same as his, but now he has surpassed me. I have to put in more effort than him to prove that my third place is deserved. Quang Lang's pride and competitiveness were his motivation to move forward, and the speed at which he searched for the Tao rune carvings was also much faster. Talent is the foundation. Whether or not you can become an expert depends on your temperament and willpower. Being strong for a while doesn't mean you will be strong forever. I will definitely catch up. Mo Hong, who looked like a scholar, had a determined look in his eyes. The others, like Bloodchild, Feng Lu, Li Xianxian and Lin Ling had similar thoughts. However, No one said anything. No one was willing to waste precious time and speed up the search for the Tao rune carvings. These geniuses all understood that even if they entered the Purple Heaven sect, they would face great competition. Because resources were limited, in a fair competition, the better they performed, the more resources they would receive. Improve. Improve. On the other side, Jiang Xi had a clear goal and didn't search aimlessly. He quickly came to the stone house at North 9th Stone House in Section C. On the roof, he saw the so-called Tao rune carvings and was immediately attracted to them. Those messy carvings seemed to have existed for countless years and still faintly emitted a shocking sword intent. It feels very similar to the sword Tao inheritance at the Green Lotus altar. Jiang Xi's eyes lit up as he carefully observed the Tao rune carvings. The Tao illusion at the Green Lotus altar used the growth and changes of the Green Lotus to demonstrate 9 processes. 1, 4, 100, 1000, 10,000, 1000, 100, 100, 4, 1. Some of these Tao runes seem to be describing the inheritance of 1 Green Lotus, while others seem to be describing 4 or 100 lotuses. At the end, Jiang Xi even saw a line of words carved in the common language of the Tao Alliance, which also emitted sharp sword intent. I've already comprehended the first 3 of the 9 growth changes of the Green Lotus. I also have a general idea of the next 1,000 and 10,000. From today onwards, I can compose the tune of 10,000 swords. Within 1,000 years, I will complete the tune of 10,000 swords. I will be able to pass 9 tribulations and the first cycle of life and death. I will become a great Tao immortal and be free in the world. Fast. Fast. By Lu Yang of the Sword Sect. Chapter 350. Jiang Xi was stunned by the bold handwriting. 9 tribulations in a row to become a great Tao immortal? Judging from the remnant sword intent, these runes have existed for a long time. This person should have succeeded, right? No, if he succeeded, then the price of the tune of 10,000 swords in the Purple Heaven sect's treasure vault would be more than 88 points. A great Tao immortal was a perfected cultivator. If one wanted to buy a perfected cultivator's cultivation technique manual, the price would be about 10,000 times higher. I wonder where this person came from. With that thought, Jiang Xi entered the omniscient eye network with his communication bead again. He searched for Lu Yang's information and added the keywords Sword Gate and Green Lotus. Otherwise, countless pieces of information would have been found. After all, there were trillions of humans in the universe, and there were countless people named Lu Yang. After adding the keywords, the search was successful almost instantly. Riverward used his spiritual sense to quickly read the contents. As a result, he sank into silence and then sighed with emotion. Another heaven-defying person who fell before becoming an immortal. In terms of talent, this person is many times stronger than Ji Wei. His talent is truly overwhelming and peerless in his generation. According to the public information, Lu Yang was a sword Tao genius from 8 million years ago and came from the Sword Gate, one of the 3 gates. After being allowed to enter the ancient Tao source world to cultivate, he passed 4 trials on his first attempt at the Green Lotus Skyreach Mountain. This achievement shocked the 9 realms of the Tao Alliance and caused a sensation among the races of the universe. In the next 30 years, Lu Yang passed the trials again and finally passed the 10th trial when he left the ancient Tao source world. At that time, many of the upper echelons of the human race thought highly of Lu Yang and thought that he was the most promising genius cultivator to become a Tao Lord. However, this genius was like a comet. After returning to the Sword Gate, he died in a trial. One must be careful on the path of cultivation. Jiang Xi took a deep breath. Regardless of the time spent cultivating, Lu Yang was even crazier than him, a genius with an experience panel. However, such a heaven-defying person died before becoming an immortal. Moreover, the human race had existed for tens of thousands of years. There must be many geniuses like Lu Yang. Jiang Xi committed caution to memory and then looked at the Sword Tao runes on the roof again. Now, let's see if Lu Yang's Sword Tao inscriptions have any effect on my Sword Tao deduction. The Wine Sword Immortal reminded him to come here to observe because these Sword Tao runes were Lu Yang's drafts before he created the melody of 10,000 swords. If these sword Dao runes were helpful to his deduction, then the effect of the melody of 10,000 swords would be even more obvious. After that, Jiang Ci carefully observed the messy carvings in front of him and muttered in his heart. Use the purple firmament sword scripture and sword domain to deduce once. A moment later, the deduction was completed. Then, he carefully sensed the changes in the sword domain. Haha, it's working. Jiang Ci was pleasantly surprised. Even though the changes were extremely subtle, so much so that even with his spiritual sense, he wouldn't have been able to discover them if he hadn't carefully examined them. But if there was a change, it meant that there was an effect. Next, Jiang Ci tried to deduce dozens of times. Finally, he came to a conclusion. The efficiency of sword Dao deduction had increased by 2 times. Although it was much slower than the speed of the inheritance altar, it was still faster than usual. Now, I'll deduce the sword Dao with all my strength, Jiang Ci thought to himself. As for the Gale Dao, he would have to wait. Because now, there was a crucial problem. Where could he get experience points? No matter how powerful the engine was, it couldn't run without oil. According to his previous plan, he would absorb and refine the Dao of heaven and earth in the ancient Dao source world. Then, he would madly deduce the Dao of heaven and earth. Now, it seemed that his original plan was too simple. Although the Dao of heaven and earth is visible to the naked eye, I can't just fly up and absorb and refine it, right? Jiang Ci shook his head. That was too impractical. Didn't you see that many powerful cultivators were looking up from the rooftops? He reckoned that as soon as he flew up, he would be slapped until not even a speck of dust remained. Let my clone hunt monsters on Earth and gain experience points. That's a good idea. Jiang Ci was deep in thought. But unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to expose the existence of his clone. Only a hidden trump card could be a trump card. He looked at his remaining experience points. Experience points, 495,000. When the 9 Regions Genius Tournament ended, I had more than 1.2 billion experience points. After a year of deduction, I have less than 500 million experience points left. Jiang Ci couldn't guarantee that he could deduce the Sword Dao or the Gale Dao with these experience points. As for deducing both, he didn't even think about it. His face wasn't that pale. I have to think of a way to get more experience points. Experience points were like the savings in the Dao Alliance Crystal Bank. Naturally, the more, the better. Jiang Ci thought about this problem as he silently deduced in his heart. His remaining experience points kept decreasing. During this process, he couldn't feel the passage of time at all. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. In one of the palaces around Nine Cloud Palace, the Wine Sword Immortal was preparing for the imparting of techniques. As a 9 Tribulations Sword Immortal who had once shocked the 9 regions, his first imparting of techniques naturally couldn't be so casual. He also had to go through some procedures and announce it widely. After all, the cultivators of the Green Lotus Sword Dao included disciples of the 3 Gates and 6 sects, as well as other talented human cultivators. There were many forces behind them. Today, Immortal Ping came again to tell him some things to pay attention to. After Immortal Ping left, the Wine Sword Immortal's spiritual sense swept across Nine Cloud City and frowned slightly. It's been half a month and that little guy still hasn't bought the tune of 10,000 swords. Just looking at Lu Yang's Sword Dao carvings on the roof, the cultivation effect isn't obvious. He got into the top 10 of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament and has a reward of 10,000 Supreme Grade Spirit Crystals. It should be more than enough to buy the tune of 10,000 swords, right? Then, the Wine Sword Immortal used his authority in the Purple Cloud Sect's treasure pavilion to do a simple check. This little guy, the 9 Regions Genius Tournament just ended and he already bought the Spirit Awakening Pearl and Soul Accumulation Fruit. He hasn't reached the nascent soul stage yet and he dares to split his spiritual sense and refine an avatar. How bold. This way, his Sword Dao will be delayed for a few more years. Fine, it's good to let him suffer a loss. The Wine Sword Immortal shook his head. Then he frowned and smiled bitterly. This nuisance of opening a mountain to teach is really not a simple task. I regret it. He drank a mouthful of wine and staggered back to the attic to sleep. As for Jiang Ci, he was very patient. He couldn't be too hasty to prevent spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm. Jiang Ci calmed down and quietly deduced the sword Dao carvings on the stone house for half a month. On this day, the peace was broken. Mu Ning excitedly came to find him. Jiang Ci, so you're here. I've been looking for you for a long time. The shepherd boy's face was full of excitement. Didn't you go to find a master? Why are you looking for me? Jiang Ci didn't have any temper towards Mu Ning. This pure-hearted shepherd boy naturally gave people a good impression. Chapter 351. After the apprenticeship, I have something good to share with you. Mu Ning looked very excited. What is it? Jiang Ci smiled. When I went to the apprenticeship, Master told me that there are 2 other good things in Nine Heavens City apart from the inheritance altar. Tell me about them. Jiang Ci's interest was piqued now. If a Dao immortal perfected emperor said it was good, then it must be good. The first is the Dao pattern carvings. Many cultivators in Nine Heavens City like to carve on the roofs. Mu Ning pretended to be mysterious. Don't talk about the Dao pattern carvings. I'm studying them now. Jiang Ci interrupted him with a smile. No wonder you're not at home, Mu Ning muttered. Only then did he notice the sword Dao carvings in front of Jiang Ci. Then he said, you definitely haven't heard of the second one. It's the spirits of Dao outside Nine Heavens City. Spirits of Dao. Jiang Ci's expression changed. He really hadn't heard of them. Mu Ning nodded with a smile. My master said that the biggest difference between the ancient Dao origin world and the original universe is that the Dao origin world. The ancient Dao origin world is like the beginning of heaven and earth. The various Daos are extremely unstable and can't be seen with the naked eye. We can easily comprehend the Daos here when we cultivate. I know all that. Jiang Ci smiled. Don't worry. You definitely don't know the rest. These unstable Daos combine with the dense heaven and earth spirit Qi to form a special life form called the spirits of Dao. A life form formed by Daos. Jiang Ci's expression changed. After these spirits of Dao die, they'll turn into a small amount of Daos with no attributes. Cultivators can directly refine and absorb them to improve their understanding of Daos. However, Master warned me that many of the newcomers in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament die in the ancient Dao origin world because they hunt spirits of Dao. If you're not strong enough, I don't recommend you go out of the city to hunt them. So I'm planning to go out of the city after a while to check out the situation. Mu Ning's eyes were still shining as he spoke. Jiang Ci had a plan in his heart. Spirits of Dao was a life form formed by Daos. Hunting them would definitely give experience points. Now that he was lacking experience, he could give it a try. However, even Mu Ning's master had reminded him that if he wasn't strong enough, he shouldn't leave the city. Before hunting, one must first assess the level of danger. Moreover, Jiang Ci had another guess. The spirit of Dao aura was a special life form formed by the Dao art. After it died, it would become a Dao art with no attributes. Then, after absorbing and refining it, would it also turn into experience points? With that in mind, he chatted with Mu Ning for a while longer. Mu Ning also knew that time was precious. In the end, he left in high spirits, saying that he was going to look for Dao runes. After pondering for a moment, Jiang Ci went to remove the spiritual awareness imprint from the stone house he had lived in before. Then, he changed his residence to this stone house with the marks of Liu Yang's sword path. After doing all this, he rushed out of the city with anticipation. Moving quickly in this grey world, they soon arrived at the gate of Nine Heavens City. He saw a few other familiar figures. They were the other geniuses from the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. When they saw Jiang Ci, they all greeted him. Jiang Ci, you've also heard of the spirit of Dao aura? Yeah, I'm going to take a look. Jiang Ci chuckled. This stone tablet has an introduction to the outside of the city. You can take a look first before you go out, someone reminded him. Oh, thank you for the reminder. Jiang Ci hurriedly thanked him and then moved lightly to a stone tablet under the city gate. And those people didn't say much. After reading it, they directly went out of the city and went hunting together. Jiang Xi looked at the stone tablet for a moment and had a general understanding of the situation outside the city. Nine Heavens City was divided into 3 areas. The first area was 2,000 kilometers around Nine Heavens City. The spirits of Tao aura here were all at the nascent soul stage. The second area was 2,000 to 20,000 kilometers around Nine Heavens City. The spirits of Tao aura were all at the nascent soul stage. The third area was the vast outermost area. The spirits of Tao aura living here were at the Tao integration stage. Note: the death rate of hunting spirits of Tao aura is extremely high. Don't take too much risk. Do what you can. The division of the areas is so detailed. It should be a cultivation ground specially prepared for the geniuses of the human race. There aren't any spirits of Tao aura above the Tao integration stage. That's right. Nine Heavens City is right next to it. Even if there are spirits of Tao aura in the tribulation immortal stage, they will be killed by the human race. Jiang Xi chuckled. From this, it could be seen that the entire ancient Tao origin world was a cultivation ground for the human race. Although the first area is full of nascent soul stage spirits of Tao aura, I can't relax. Not only did Mu Ning's master remind me, but the stone tablet also emphasized that the death rate outside the city is very high. This means that even if the area outside the city is divided by the human race, it's still very dangerous. After all, those who could cultivate in the ancient Tao origin world wouldn't be weak. After seeing Lu Yang's experience, Jiang Xi's vigilance rose to the highest level. At this time, many geniuses came from the city. He also reminded them to take a look at the stone tablet. Then he didn't stay any longer and stepped into the area outside Nine Heavens City in a flash. The terrain outside the city wasn't complicated. There were also mountains and rivers. However, these mountains were very low and hilly. Moreover, the grey fog outside the city was thicker, and visibility was very low. It gave people the feeling that there was some great danger hidden inside. What shocked Jiang Xi even more was that the grey fog had the effect of suppressing spiritual sense. The range of his spiritual sense was greatly reduced. To be safe, he didn't go too far from Nine Heavens City. There's movement. After walking for a while, Jiang Xi heard a rustling sound in the fog not far away. Wu, a creature with 2.5 heads, broke through the thick fog and arrived in front of River Word. It let out a strange low growl. Late stage nascent soul stage. Jiang Xi judged the strength of this spirit of Tao aura through the strength of its aura. Kill. Jiang Xi stabbed with his sword and his figure flashed. Raw. It was surprisingly easy to kill. Jiang Xi relied on his Taoist technique strength that was far beyond the nascent soul stage. With just one sword, he instantly killed this spirit of Tao aura in the late nascent soul stage. You killed a spirit of Tao aura in the late nascent soul stage. Experience points plus 3,800, the experience panel's prompt sounded in his mind, but Jiang Xi didn't pay attention to it. Because the spirit of Tao aura that he killed turned into a colorful ball of light the size of a fingernail in less than a breath's time. Is this an attributeless Taoist technique? Jiang Xi waved his hand and his body absorbed the colorful ball of light. Almost in the blink of an eye, these balls of light were completely refined by him. You comprehended an attributeless Taoist technique. Experience points plus 1 million, the experience panel's prompt sounded again. Jiang Xi's eyes widened in surprise, but before he had time to feel anything, there was a big movement in the grey world in the distance. Chapter 352. Go. There are too many. Roar. Panicked shouts and strange roars came from the world of grey fog. Rumble. The shouts quickly disappeared, but the ground shook more and more violently, as if thousands of beasts were running. Jiang Xi's face changed. He recognized that the shouts were from the geniuses who had reminded him to look at the stone tablet at the city gate. It had been less than 10 minutes and they were all dead. Those people were not weak. They were all the top 360 geniuses of the 9 Zones Geniuses competition. Otherwise, they would not have the guts to greet him. Run. Jiang Xi did not hesitate. He turned and ran. In the next moment, the grey fog started to churn violently. Strange nascent soul stage Daoist rhyme spirits started to rush towards them from all directions. There were hundreds of thousands of them. Whoosh! Not only did Jiang Xi use the Gale Realm, but he also used the Tao of Fire. The wind helped the fire, and his speed was at its highest. He left behind a series of afterimages. In an instant, he was back at the city gate. The spirits of Daoist rhyme that were chasing after them seemed to be afraid of Nine Heavens City. They stopped 10 kilometers away. They only growled fiercely, emitting a bloodthirsty light. Jiang Xi turned around and looked at the hundreds of thousands of spirits of Tao. He was horrified. Almost caught up to him. If he had been caught by hundreds of thousands of nascent soul stage cultivators, he would have been turned into dust. Jiang Xi finally understood why immortal Yi Liang had said, "Survive." At that time, no one had discovered any fatal danger in Nine Heavens City. They had thought that they would be fine as long as they did not disturb the powerhouses. It turned out that the danger did not come from the powerhouses who were immersed in cultivation. It came from the spirits of Tao outside the city. Below the city gate, the other geniuses who were about to leave the city to hunt spirits of Tao saw this scene. Their faces turned pale, and they were terrified. Jiang Xi, are these all spirits of Tao? Someone could not help but ask. Yes. Jiang Xi nodded, looking serious. Go back, and cultivate. Before they even stepped out of the city gate, they gave up on the hunting trip that they had been looking forward to. Although the risks and benefits were equal. But before they saw the benefits, they saw the risks. Jiang Xi didn't leave immediately because he saw the profits. He was carefully observing the hundreds of thousands of ferocious spirits. A moment later, all the spirits of the Daoist rhymes returned to the grey world and hid in the grey mist. The risk is high, but the reward is also high. Jiang Xi calculated in his heart. Killing a nascent soul stage spirit of Daoist rhyme didn't count the experience points gained. Refining those non-elemental Daoist arts actually gave him 1 million experience point. Right now, he was lacking experience points. I'm sure that spirits of the precepts don't dare to come within 10 kilometers of Nine Heavens City. The one I just killed seems to be a lone spirit of the precepts. I just don't know if this situation of being alone is a coincidence, or does it happen often? Under the premise of ensuring a safe distance, go and investigate again. Jiang Xi made his decision. If there really wasn't a chance, then he would give up. His life was the most important. His figure flashed and he came to a place 20 kilometers away from Nine Heavens City. This distance could ensure that he returned to the safe area in the shortest time possible. Then he hid and waited quietly, remaining patient. About 2 hours later, there was a slight movement in the grey mist world in front of him. Although the detection range of his spiritual sense had shrunk, he soon detected a black spirit of the precepts with 8 legs. Roar! That spirit of the precepts had also discovered Jiang Xi and directly pounced on him fiercely. The speed of a nascent soul stage cultivator arrived in an instant. But in Jiang Xi's eyes, it was not enough at all. Sword light flashed. With 2 slashes, he easily killed it again. You killed a mid-stage nascent soul stage spirit of Daoist rhyme, experience points plus 3,400. Then, Jiang Xi directly absorbed the non-elemental Daoist art formed by the spirit of Daoist rhyme. You comprehended a non-elemental Daoist art, experience points plus 1 million. He turned around and left. Roar! Roar! Rumble, accompanied by strange roars one after another, the ground shook violently. A large number of spirit of Daoist rhyme beasts attacked again. But this time, Jiang Xi was prepared in advance. With extreme speed, he steadily returned to the safe area within 10 kilometers of Nine Heavens City. Those hundreds of thousands of spirits of Daoist rhyme stopped 10 kilometers away, constantly roaring. There's hope. Jiang Xi was overjoyed. This proved that the spirits of Daoist rhyme were really afraid of Nine Heavens City and did not dare to approach. And he found that the spirits of Daoist rhyme had very low intelligence. They only had a simple impulse to kill. Hunting them was much easier than normal nascent soul stage cultivators. The real danger mainly came from the huge number of spirits of Daoist rhyme. So, when all the spirits of Daoist rhyme had dispersed, Jiang Ci once again waited 20 kilometers away. Wait for the fish that escaped the net. Then he would hunt and escape. As time passed, more and more geniuses heard about the existence of the spirits of Daoist rhyme. Although many people had seen the terrifying number of spirits of Daoist rhyme, there would never be a lack of people in the world who dared to take risks. Especially when some geniuses refined non-elemental Daoist techniques and found that their Daoist technique comprehension had improved, their drive to hunt was even stronger. The high risk had brought about huge profits. Soon, the geniuses set off a wave of craze to hunt the spirits of Daoist rhyme. There were even people who dared to go deep into the fog world. So, in just half a month, nearly 10% of the 3,600 people died. More than 300 people died outside Nine Heavens City. The stage of hunting the spirits of Daoist rhyme eliminated many people with poor temperament, will, battle experience, and carelessness. Fate was death. And Jiang Ci only reminded Mu Ning during this process. Then he steadily maintained his own rhythm and picked up the fish that escaped the net every day. Of course, he knew what was important. The purpose of gaining experience was to improve his strength, so the plan he set for himself was to come out and hunt for 10 days a month. The rest of the time, he would be on the roof of the stone house, deducing his sword Dao according to the runes left by Liu Yang. A month later, another piece of news that shook the entire Nine Heavens City quickly spread. The Wine Sword Immortal, who had been silent for 50,000 years, was going to teach many Essence Soul, Dao integration, and even Tribulation Immortal powerhouses who were cultivating in Nine Heavens City suddenly became excited. Those who were qualified to listen to the class all went to the Wine Sword Immortal's residence. Who was the Wine Sword Immortal? Among the geniuses, except for a few people with extraordinary backgrounds, the others had never heard of the Wine Sword Immortal. But soon, everyone found the information of the Wine Sword Immortal on the Eye of Heaven network. After learning about the Wine Sword Immortal's past, those geniuses who used swords as weapons all showed a look of fascination. Sword Immortals were like this. They wished they could become the Wine Sword Immortal's disciple right now. Unfortunately, they were not qualified to listen to the Wine Sword Immortal's class. In this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament, only Ji Wei had passed the second stage of the Sky-Piercing Mountain. And if they wanted to listen to a Tribulation Immortal powerhouse, they had to at least pass the third stage of the Sky-Piercing Mountain. Chapter 353. Jiang Ci already knew about the Wine Sword Immortal and had received his advice. Therefore, he was only surprised by this. Such a powerhouse had actually not opened his sect to accept disciples all this time. However, he quickly put this matter to the back of his mind. He only had 30 years in the ancient Dao Source world, so he had to seize the time to cultivate. Time flew by, and a year passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Jiang Ci sat cross-legged on the roof of the stone house as usual, immersed in cultivation. He stared at the sword Dao inscriptions, and occasionally looked up at the Dao techniques visible to the naked eye. He kept repeating the deduction in his heart, "You have comprehended the sword Dao, experience points plus 20 million, when the pleasant notification sounded in his mind, Jiang Ci's body shook, and his eyes were filled with surprise. Success. It was too sudden. He quickly opened the experience points panel to check. Cultivation, true body, nascent soul, later stage, 106 million, 106 million, clone, golden core, later stage, 397500397500, Dao technique sword Dao, less than 110 million, fire Dao, 10th level, 50 million, gale domain, 10th level, 5 million, amplitude, 1000 times, Dao of fire, secret technique cultivation technique, purple firmament sword scripture, peacock visualization deduction, 10,000 experience points per time experience points, 608, 950, 000. After seeing the changes in the experience points panel, Jiang Ci's expression became even more surprised. His sword domain had been successfully upgraded to the sword Dao. He had spent 1/3 of this year hunting those lone spirits of Dao outside Nine Firmament City. The experience points he had gained had exceeded 1.5 billion. And these experience points had been used up by him in this year. In total, in order to deduce the sword Dao, he had used up more than 2.5 billion experience points. Now, he had finally received his reward. Of course, this was not without some help. If it were not for the enlightenment at the Green Lotus altar and the sword Dao inscriptions left by Liu Yang, the sword Dao deduction would have consumed at least 5 billion experience point. In addition to his surprise, Jiang Xi also noticed the sword Dao's upgrade experience points. 100 million EXP to level up, just as I expected. Because the sword Dao is a special Dao technique, its amplitude limit is twice that of the rare Heaven and Earth Dao, so the upgrade experience points are also twice as much. Next, I just need to raise my strength. Because there were many big shots in Nine Heavens City, in order to guard against those who had nothing better to do, they liked to use their spiritual awareness to investigate others. Jiang Xi decided to let his clone on Earth's first moon increase the level of his sword Dao experience. Before leaving Earth, he had prepared a large number of 10,000-year-old spiritual fruits for his clone. 2 words, enough. Now, whether it was experience points or spiritual energy, they were nothing to him. However, because the avatar was still in the golden core stage, the efficiency of refining the 10,000-year-old spiritual fruit was not that high. It was estimated that it would take a month to refine 100 million points of spiritual energy. The time in the origin universe is 3.6 times that of the ancient Dao origin world. 1 month in the origin universe is only 8 or 9 days here. While Jiang Xi was calmly cultivating and improving himself. The river diagram of the Skyspan Mountain, on the vast continent where the Skyspan Mountain was located. The black-robed old man, Lord Shoshan, had been guarding these sky-piercing mountains for countless years. It wasn't just the human geniuses from the ancient Dao origin world who could enter this place. Other immortal Dao sects or cultivators with contributions could enter the corresponding sky-piercing mountains as long as they chose an inheritance altar. A girl in a red dress flew up the sky-piercing mountain. 10 minutes later, the Lord Shoshan smiled and said, Yang Jiufeng passed the first trial. Whoosh! Everyone was shocked. Then, everyone felt that it was natural, because Yang Jiufeng was second in the 9 regions genius battle. She had almost passed the previous trial. As for Quang Lang, who was third in the 9 regions genius battle, he gritted his teeth and had a cold expression. It was difficult for him to show the arrogance he had in the past. Why? They're both level 4 disciples of the Purple Heaven sect. I'm so far behind them. He had already tried to break through once, and had also failed. This year's 9 regions genius battle was special. There were 3 level 4 disciples of the Purple Heaven sect, and the top 3 could all enter the level 4. Although he had gotten third, there were already people privately saying that Quang Lang was a lucky guy. Because the strength that Mu Ning and River Word displayed now was stronger than his. Of course, this didn't mean that he was weak. Compared to other geniuses, he could be ranked 5th in the sky-piercing mountain. This is not the result I wanted. I, Quang Lang, can't be worse than others. Just as Quang Lang was about to leave and cultivate. Another figure appeared on the platform in front of the sky-piercing mountain. Jiang Xi is here. Chapter 354. Jiang Xi really didn't mean to be the last to arrive. He also received the news that Ji Wei had passed the 3rd stage. However, at that time, his sword Dao was at the final stage of perfection. In order to ensure that the final improvement could be carried out safely and smoothly, he put most of his attention on his clone. That was why he was a little late. Fortunately, the result was good. Sword Dao, 10th tier, 10,000,000,000,000,000,000, amplitude, 2,000 times, sword Dao. His sword Dao had successfully reached the 10th tier of perfection. His spiritual power amplitude had also increased to 2,000 times. Jiang Xi, you're the only one left. Yang Jiufeng also passed the 1st stage just now. Hurry up and show us what you've got. Mu Ning shouted. He also went to try just now, but unfortunately, he didn't pass the 2nd stage. Yang Jiufeng also passed the first stage? Jiang Ci was eager to try. If he didn't count the stages, there were now 3 people who had passed the stages: Ji Wei, Mu Ning, and Yang Jiufeng. Then let's see how strong I am now after reaching perfection in my sword Dao. Jiang Ci looked at the green lotus Skyreach mountain. At this moment, the other geniuses were also looking at him. There weren't many people left in the queue to challenge the mountain. The only one who was truly strong was Jiang Ci. Could Jiang Ci succeed? Many people asked in their hearts. Under everyone's gaze, Jiang Ci walked in front of the mountain guard and bowed respectfully. Lord Mountain Guard, I want to challenge the mountain. Go ahead. There's no one on the green lotus Skyreach mountain. The mountain guard nodded lightly. Jiang Ci flew away. The mountain guard's eyes were a little surprised. This little guy has a sharp sword Dao perfection intent on him. It seems like he has reached perfection in his sword Dao. It's only been a year, and he has cultivated from the sword domain to the sword Dao. And he has even reached perfection? He hadn't seen such a situation in millions of years. A little bit of anticipation rose in his heart again under normal circumstances. When a cultivator's Dao of heaven and earth reached perfection, the Daoist rhymes on his body would be restrained. It would be difficult for others to see his Dao technique realm. Others might not be able to see Jiang Ci's Dao technique realm, but the mountain guardian could. Otherwise, he would not have guarded these heaven-span mountains for the human race for countless years. Over here, Jiang Ci quickly arrived at the Green Lotus Heavenspan mountain and ascended the stairs. After stepping onto the first empty platform, he entered the illusion. It was still that endless mountain range. The gatekeeper wore armor and carried a long sword on his back as he stood in the air. You again? Those 8 little fellows didn't make any progress at all. I advise you to. That's not right. Have you perfected your sword Dao? The gatekeeper originally had a calm expression, but he was suddenly shocked. It had only been a year. I made a small breakthrough. Jiang Ci smiled. He didn't intend to hide his breakthrough. At his current height, he was no longer in a situation where he had to be cautious. The upper echelons of the human race looked at talent. The better he performed, the more heaven-defying he was, the better resources he would receive. Haha, an interesting little fellow has finally appeared. The gatekeeper gave a rare laugh. Then, he said seriously, same rules as before. Our cultivation levels are the same. My Dao techniques will remain at the ordinary first tier of the Great Dao realm, however, I'm using sword intent. Its offensive power isn't something an ordinary Great Dao can compare to. Come on. Jiang Ci's fighting spirit was also high, and he was not afraid at all. The slaughtering shadow sword was covered in a layer of sword shadows. Like dense clouds, it suddenly expanded to 10,000 zhong long. The way of the sword. Take the initiative to attack. The mighty sword shadow attacked the guardian who was clad in battle armor. The gatekeeper laughed out loud as well. He unsheathed the sword on his back, and a towering sword will swept out. Boom! Boom! The sword light surged and swept through the illusory space. The mountains below crumbled one after another, and rubble filled the air. Whoosh! The 2 figures were locked in battle in the air. Clang! Clang! The weapons clashed continuously, causing the space to tremble violently. It was definitely a head-on battle. Both of their cultivation levels were maintained at the perfected nascent soul realm. In terms of Dao techniques, although the gatekeeper was at the first tier of sword intent, according to the rules, he could only unleash the power of an ordinary first tier of the Great Dao realm. In terms of spiritual power amplitude, it would be 1,900 times. As for Jiang Ci, he could unleash his strongest strength to his heart's content. The 10th tier of the Sword Dao realm had a maximum amplitude of 2,000 times. It seemed like there wasn't much difference, but in a battle between experts, 0.1 times was often enough to determine the outcome. Moreover, there was a difference of 100 times. Haha, great! Jiang Ci's figure flashed and twisted in the air as he attacked with all his might. In addition, he also had the Dao of Fire. This time, it was the gatekeeper's turn to defend. Swoosh! During the battle, Jiang Ci found an opportunity to kill the gatekeeper with a swing of his sword. You killed a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, fake. Experience points plus 380, success. Although he had expected it, Jiang Ci was still overjoyed. Buzz, the space changed drastically. Everything was restored to its original state. The gatekeeper who was just killed reappeared in front of Jiang Ci. Not bad. Although you still can't compare to those 1 in a million years sword geniuses, as long as you maintain this speed of improvement, you will catch up. I believe that you will catch up to them sooner or later, the gatekeeper said with a chuckle. Many thanks. Jiang Ci cupped his hands in thanks, then disappeared. Space changed, and his figure reappeared on the first platform of the Green Lotus Heavenly Mountain. Then he stepped on the stone steps again and rushed toward the second stage. After entering the second stage's illusion, what surprised Jiang Ci was that the gatekeeper was actually still the one from the first stage. He looked exactly the same. Don't be surprised. It will be me in the future. The gatekeeper chuckled. Then the battle began again. At the same time, below the mountains, a group of geniuses was waiting, basically all waiting for Jiang Ci's results. The mountain keeper suddenly smiled and said, Jiang Ci also cleared the first stage. Immediately, there was another round of shock all around. Another one. Not counting the stages, there are already 4 people in the top 10 who have succeeded. This freak likes to hide his strength in the 9 regions genius battle, then erupt. I wonder if it will be the same this time? I think it's possible, everyone discussed animatedly. What made everyone heave a sigh of relief was that when Jiang Ci's figure flew back from the Green Lotus Heavenly Mountain, the mountain keeper did not speak again. This meant that Jiang Ci failed in the second stage. However, the 6 geniuses in the top 10 who had not succeeded yet had extremely complicated feelings. People like Mo Hong, Li Xianxian, Lin Ling Bloodchild, and Feng Lu either had bitter expressions or high fighting spirit, unwilling to admit defeat. And the remaining Quang Lang became a special case. Because he was 3rd place, a Purple Heaven Sect 4th Firmament disciple. Furthermore, his strength was almost the same as Jiang Ci back then. Now, Jiang Ci had already far surpassed him. Jiang Ci, not bad. Mu Ning laughed loudly. Congratulations. Yang Jiufeng and the other geniuses also had people congratulating Jiang Ci. Jiang Ci nodded in return one by one. After the commotion, everyone did not waste precious time and left the Heavenly Mountain River diagram. Chapter 355. The news of Jiang Ci and Yang Jiufeng passing the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain did not cause much of a stir in Nine Heavens City. After all, there were many immortal Dao experts. 2 nascent soul cultivators were not worthy of much attention. Nine Heavens City, Wine Sword Immortal's huge palace. A 3D image was suspended in the main hall. It showed the battle scene of Jiang Ci passing the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain. Wine Sword Immortal and Immortal Ping watched carefully. As expected of Big Brother Zhongli. His eyes are still sharp. In just a year, this young man has not only completed the domain transformation, he has also reached the perfection realm. His sword Dao cultivation speed is much faster than Big Brother's back then. Immortal Ping was shocked. Wine Sword Immortal laughed and did not show the doubts hidden in his heart. He could not say that he had made an error in judgment, right? According to his estimation, Jiang Ci should need 3 to 5 years to step onto the sword Dao. Then, he would pass the first stage in 10 years and the third stage in 30 years. He did not expect Jiang Ci to reach such heights in just a year. A pure sword Dao could go from the sword domain to the sword Dao and reach the perfection realm in a year? How many years had it been? Interesting. Wine Sword Immortal opened his shirt and drank wine. He shook his head and hummed lightly. Jiang Ci sat cross-legged on the stone bed in the stone house. He thought back to his battle in the second stage of the Green Lotus Sky-Piercing Mountain. In the second stage of the Sky-Piercing Mountain, the Guardian's Dao technique is equivalent to an ordinary second-level Great Dao. His spiritual energy amplitude is 2,800 times, while mine is 2,000 times. Not only is there a difference in spiritual energy amplitude, but in terms of battle techniques, I am also much weaker. He could clearly feel that the Guardian's strength in the second stage had increased by a level. And his battle techniques were richer. Many of his moves were impossible to guard against. Jiang Xi understood that the Guardian's battle techniques in the first stage were not bad. After all, they were the same person. It was only because he had the upper hand in the first stage to a large extent, it could be said that he won with strength, making it difficult for the Guardian to use his full strength. After this round of investigation, Jiang Xi knew that the practical application of Dao techniques was still his shortcoming. Senior Wine Sword Immortal, the tune of 10,000 swords that you advised me to buy is the basic application manual of the Green Lotus Sword Dao. I didn't have enough money and points last time, but I have enough this time. After clearing the first stage, due to the tenfold reward from the novice stage, you'll receive 1,000 points straight away. Meanwhile, the tune of 10,000 swords only requires 88 points. With that in mind, Jiang Xi connected to the Omniscient Eye network through his communication bead and entered the Purple Heaven Sex treasure vault. Search for tune of 10,000 sword. Then, he placed an order to buy it. Since it was a cultivation technique manual, it was a text message. The Purple Heaven Sex treasure pavilion directly sent the entire melody of 10,000 swords to Jiang Xi through the Eye of Heaven network. Relying on his powerful spiritual sense, Riverward quickly finished reading the contents of the entire ancient book and memorized it by heart. Wonderful, wonderful. Sword Dao can be used like this. This move can be used like this. It seems that the way I used the Sword Dao in the past was too crude. Jiang Xi's mind was completely immersed in the melody of 10,000 swords. It was like when he was in school. He learned a lot of theoretical knowledge and became a theoretical emperor, but in the end, his actual practice was worlds apart. He was somewhat similar in terms of Sword Dao now. His Dao technique realm was high, but in a real battle, he could not fully unleash the strength of this realm. The melody of 10,000 swords was the analysis and comprehension of the first three transformations of the Green Lotus Sword Dao by the sword sect genius Liu Yang 8 million years ago. At the same time, it included various basic applications of Sword Dao. Liu Yang is indeed a 1 in a million Sword Dao genius. Every transformation of the Green Lotus is extremely mysterious. Even a Dao immortal would find it difficult to fully comprehend it. Yet, he only used 3 sets of sword techniques to completely display the first 3 transformations of the Green Lotus. This is really good stuff. Jiang Xi's eyes lit up. What surprised him even more was that after he memorized the melody of 10,000 swords by heart, the words melody of 10,000 swords appeared in the cultivation technique column on the experience panel. Cultivation technique, Purple Heaven Sword Sutra, Peacock Visualization, Melody of 10,000 Swords. It meant that this was a cultivation technique manual that even the experience panel recognized and was extremely valuable. Immediately after, he tried to deduce the Sword Dao once more. Let's deduce it once with the Purple Firmament Sword Sutra, Sword Dao and Melody of 10,000 Swords. A moment later, the deduction was completed. There were no obvious changes. However, Jiang Xi could vaguely sense that he gained some insights in his mind and a deeper understanding of the application of Sword Dao. It was effective. As expected, by deducing relevant applicable Dao techniques, he could improve his ability to use Dao techniques in a practical way. Jiang Xi was elated. If he continued deducing as such, his practical application of Sword Dao would gradually improve. The next cultivation direction would be to comprehend and deduce the melody of 10,000 swords to improve the application of Sword Dao. At the same time, I'll continue trying to fuse the Dao of Sword and Dao of Li Fire. Ever since his Dao of Li Fire was perfected, he had been trying to fuse Dao techniques once more but to no avail. Right now, he had to settle for the next best thing, fusing 2 Dao techniques instead of 3. He believed that the fusion of 2 Dao techniques of heaven and earth would be much stronger than the original 3 low-level Dao techniques. After that, Jiang Xi really stopped paying attention to the outside world. Apart from leaving the city for 10 days every month to hunt spirits of Dao, the rest of his time was devoted to cultivation. As the saying went, cultivation was timeless. Focusing on cultivation was one aspect. Another aspect was the long lifespan. It was easy to overlook the passage of time. Of the 3,600 geniuses who entered the ancient Tao source world to cultivate, more than 300 died in the first year. In the second year, more than 200 died because of hunting spirits of Tao. The rate of death was decreasing. In this year, Kuang Lang finally passed the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain. However, he no longer had the right to be arrogant. He had fallen behind by so much, so he had to work harder in the third year. Bloodchild, Mo Hong, Li Xianxian, Lin Ling and Feng Lu all passed the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain. At the same time, due to the difference in time between the ancient Tao source world and the original universe, Jiang Xi's clone in the original universe finally completed the nurturing of the golden core and cultivated to the nascent soul realm after 10 years. His trump cards gradually became stronger. In the fourth year, the top 360 geniuses of the 9 regions genius tournament also began to pass the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain. As for the geniuses at the bottom of the rankings, apart from those who had already died, they were also working hard. The competition continued, and no one dared to relax. In the next few years, the others more or less tried to pass the sky-piercing mountain. Some succeeded, and some failed. Only Jiang Xi didn't make a move. He maintained his own cultivation pace and wasn't affected by others. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed in the ancient Tao source world, and 36 years had passed in the original universe. During this time, Jiang Dudu experienced another deep slumber, and her cultivation rose to the nascent soul realm. This made Jiang Xi sigh. The difficulty of cultivation. Chapter 356. In fact, Jiang Xi sometimes wondered if this girl was the reincarnation of an immortal Tao big shot. He had worked so hard to reach this stage, but Jiang Dudu only needed to sleep for a while to level up. That was how it was written in novels and books. Something like a ruthless emperor. However, Jiang Xi was happy to see this. In the future, he wouldn't have to spend time and energy to help Jiang Dudu improve her strength. In addition, Xian Tian and Li Baibai, who had reached the golden core stage a long time ago, had also broken through to the nascent soul stage in these 36 years. One of them was cultivating in the Tsangyun sect, while the other was cultivating in the Tao Alliance's Temple of Time. Compared to when they were on Earth, their speed of improvement was a little faster. After all, with the guidance of their master, they would take fewer detours. Everyone was improving, and Jiang Xi naturally wouldn't fall behind. In the past 10 years, he had been deducing Tao techniques and comprehending the melody of 10,000 swords. Now, his control and use of sword Tao had become more and more skillful. At the same time, he was also trying to fuse sword Tao and Li fire Tao. He never gave up. On this day, Jiang Xi returned from hunting Tao rune spirits outside Nine Heavens City. He continued to try to fuse sword Tao and Li fire Tao. The Tao runes of the 2 Tao techniques circled around him, clearly separated. And he was using all kinds of methods to try to fuse the 2 Tao techniques. At the same time, he was silently deducing in his heart. After an unknown period of time, suddenly Jiang Xi was stunned. The 2 completely unrelated Daoist rhymes suddenly showed signs of merging at this moment. Experience points panel has been updated. Please check it. When the pleasant notification sounded in his mind, Jiang Xi's eyes were immediately filled with surprise. The experience points panel was updated. Was there a new function? Or something else? He quickly opened it. Cultivation True Body, Nascent Soul, Advanced Stage 1. 06 million 1. 06 million. Clone, Nascent Soul, Advanced Stage 1. 06 million 1. 06 million, Tao Technique Sword Tao, 10th level, 10 million 10 million, Li Fire Tao, 10th level, 50 million 50 million, Gale Domain, 10th level, 5 million 5 million, Amplitude, 2000 times, Sword Tao, Secret Technique Tao Fusion Technique, Tao of Sword, Tao of Fire, 12 million, Amplitude 1, Martial Arts, Purple Cloud Sword Scripture, Peacock Visualization, Melody of 10,000 Swords Deduction, 10,000 EXP per UCXP, 1-832-430-000. When Jiang Ci saw the changes in the EXP panel, he was even more surprised. An additional secret technique pane appeared. The first secret technique was the Dao fusion technique. Back then, the Dao fusion that he had blindly pondered had actually evolved into a secret technique after the Daoist rhymes of the two Daos of heaven and earth had fused slightly, and it's a secret technique that can be leveled up with EXP. The fusion of the Dao of Sword and the Dao of Fire requires 200 million experience points to level up. It's still within an acceptable range. The effect of the Dao fusion technique is displayed too. Amplitude x1, multiplied by 1. In other words, after leveling up the Dao fusion technique, my spiritual energy amplitude will increase again? It's very possible. After all, before the Dao technique reached the level of the Dao of heaven and earth, a crude Dao technique fusion technique could cause the might of the Dao technique to increase explosively. Jiang Ci's mind spun rapidly as he quickly connected the dots. Surprise! This was a huge surprise. The Dao fusion technique was a wondrous technique that could increase one's strength. Ever since the Dao of Fire was perfected and flawless, it could not be used anymore. Now that it appeared on the EXP panel, there would be unlimited possibilities in the future. Next, level up. Jiang Ci did not let the surprise get to his head. He continued to be cautious. He let his clone in the original universe refine large amounts of spiritual fruits to increase the Dao fusion technique's level and experience points. 9 Heaven City, Winesword Immortal's Palace. Winesword Immortal would hold a class once a month. Although each time he taught Dao techniques, it was always full of people. However, after teaching for so long, he had only taken in one disciple. Alright, this month's class ends here. See you next month. Winesword Immortal did not care about his image. He lay on his side on the throne in the main hall and waved his hand, signaling the cultivators who came to listen to the class to leave. Everyone bowed respectfully and left. When the main hall was empty, he said to a Dao integration stage youth standing beside him, "Yiming, prepare to receive the guest." Although he had been cultivating with Winesword Immortal for a year, Qin Yiming still could not figure out his master's style of doing things. However, he did not dare to be negligent and immediately set up the main hall. Sure enough, after a short while, a person flew in from outside the hall on a 5-colored auspicious cloud. "Zhongli, you're finally willing to come out." A hearty laugh sounded at the same time. Winesword Immortal greeted him with a smile. It was a man in a green robe with disheveled hair. It was Immortal Iliang, who had been supervising the 9 regions genius battle. Soon, Immortal Ping also arrived. The 3 of them were old friends. Soon, they sat down in the hall and talked about the past tens of thousands of years ago, accompanied by good wine and delicious food. This time, he drank for half a month. After a mess of cups and plates, Immortal Iliang smiled drunkenly. "Only your wine can make me feel drunk." "Of course. Although my wine is not a 100,000-year-old Guanghan wine, it is still a rare good wine in the world." Winesword Immortal chuckled. "I remember that you still have 3,000 years of lifespan left, right?" Immortal Iliang suddenly thought of something and frowned. Immortal Ping gave him a look. Why did he have to mention that of all people? Unexpectedly, Winesword Immortal laughed in a carefree manner. "So what if I still have 3,000 years? I've already lived for almost 100,000 years. Life and death are no longer important to me. You should let it go. After all, it's been 50,000 years." Immortal Iliang sighed. "Let it go? How can I let it go if that Yarrow doesn't die? I saw him kill Rong with my own eyes. I hate that I can't drink his blood, eat his flesh, and burn his bones to ashes." Winesword Immortal's face became ferocious and terrifying. It was completely different from his usual carefree and heroic appearance. Immortal Ping's face was filled with worry. She glared at Immortal Iliang. Sigh. Immortal Iliang felt helpless. He also wanted to help his old friend get rid of his inner demon. But now, it seemed that Winesword Immortal's inner demon would be hard to get rid of. That was because that Yarrow Dao Immortal had already become a Yarrow Dao Lord. "Let's drink, let's drink." Wine Sword Immortal waved his hand and returned to his carefree and unrestrained self. He hid many things in his heart. When Immortal Ping saw this, she hurriedly changed the topic. She smiled and asked Immortal Iliang, "Haven't you always been working under True Monarch Iron Mountain? Why did you come to Nine Heavens City? Don't tell me you're here to see me. If you wanted to see me, you would have come a long time ago," Wine Sword Immortal added. Immortal Iliang shook his head and chuckled. "It's all because of those youths in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. According to the rules, if the youths in this tournament are successful in their cultivation, they will all be under True Monarch Iron Mountain. They've already been cultivating in the ancient Tao origin world for 10 years. True Monarch Iron Mountain specially asked me to come and see how they're doing." Chapter 357. The 3 immortals changed the topic to the youths in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Immortal Ping asked, "What's the situation like?" Immortal Yi Liang smiled. "This tournament is different from the past. There are many good seedlings. Among them, Ji Wei is the most valued by True Monarch Iron Mountain. He passed the 4th trial a year ago." Speaking of Ji Wei, Immortal Yi Liang's smile widened. Then, he continued, "Mu Ning, Yang Jiufeng, Quang Lang, Mo Hong, and Bloodchild also passed the 2nd trial. The rate of improvement of these youths is the fastest in the past million years. Perhaps 1 or 2 Tribulation Transcender powerhouses will emerge." There were differences between Tribulation Transcenders. 1 Tribulation Transcender and 9 Tribulation Transcender were definitely different. Wine Sword Immortal nodded. "Indeed." Immortal Yi Liang shook his head. "It's just that I don't understand Jiang Xi's performance. If he could pass the 1st trial in his 1st year, he should have passed the 2nd trial a long time ago. However, he hasn't done anything in the past 10 years. Everyone else is working hard to obtain the inheritance altar. I don't know what he's thinking. He's not in a hurry at all." Immortal Ping smiled. "You can ask Big Brother Zhongli about this. He knows Jiang Xi quite well." "Oh." Immortal Yi Liang looked at Wine Sword Immortal. Wine Sword Immortal took a sip of wine and said, "To be honest, I can't see through him anymore. 10 years ago, I gave him some pointers and told him to buy the tune of 10,000 swords to improve his sword technique. I didn't expect him to become like this after buying it." Immortal Yi Liang's expression changed. Did he take a wrong path and focus on sword technique? Wine Sword Immortal hesitated. "That shouldn't be, right?" Immortal Yi Liang said, "That's what I'm worried about. It seems that I'll have to remind him when we leave. The next 30 years in the ancient Tao origin world is the best time to build a foundation," Immortal Yi Liang said. He scanned 9 Heavens City with his spiritual sense and saw Jiang Xi sitting cross-legged on a roof. After Jiang Xi's clone reached the nascent soul stage, the efficiency of refining 10,000-year-old spirit fruits had increased greatly. In just 20 days, he had refined 200 million points of spiritual energy. He looked at the changes in his EXP panel Tao fusion technique, Tao of Sword, Tao of Fire, 20,000,000,200,000,000, Amplitude 2, Amplitude 2. As expected, after the Tao fusion of the Tao of the Sword and the Tao of the Li Fire reaches perfection, the Tao of the Li Fire Tao will become extremely powerful. My spiritual energy amplitude can be directly multiplied by 2 times on top of the original foundation. I wonder how many times the Tao fusion technique of 3 Taos of heaven and earth will be amplified. Jiang Xi was looking forward to it. When I use the Tao fusion technique, my current amplitude can increase to 4,000 times. It's a good opportunity to challenge the Heavenspan mountain and test my strength. Immediately, Jiang Xi used his spiritual sense to enter the sky-reaching mountain and river painting through the communication bead. They appeared on the vast continent where the 44 sky-reaching mountains were located. He came before the Lord Mountain Guardian and bowed. "Greetings, Lord Mountain Guardian." The Lord Mountain Guardian opened his eyes. "Oh, it's Jiang Xi. I remember that you haven't been here for 10 years. The youths in your batch have all improved a lot. You have to work hard. I've been polishing my Tao before, so I don't want to be distracted." Jiang Xi smiled. Yes, not bad. The Green Lotus sky-reaching mountain happens to be empty. Hurry up and challenge it. The Lord Mountain Guardian nodded. Jiang Xi bowed again before flying toward the Green Lotus sky-reaching mountain. He's been cultivating in seclusion for 10 years. I wonder what kind of breakthrough he made this time. Could it be that he comprehended sword intent? The Lord Mountain Guardian could not help but think of this. Then, he shook his head. For thousands of years, only Liu Yang has been able to comprehend sword intent in just 10 years in the ancient Tao origin world. On the other side, Jiang Xi quickly arrived at the foot of the Green Lotus sky-reaching mountain and looked at the stone tablet again. Then, he quickly climbed up the stone steps to the platform of the second stage. The space changed, and his spiritual body fell into an illusion. It was still the same endless mountain range, and the armored guardian stood in the air with a sword on his back. It's you. We haven't seen each other for 10 years. Are you confident that you can pass my second stage this time? The guardian said in a low voice. Why don't you give it a try? Jiang Xi said with a faint smile. He directly unsheathed his sword, and a cold sword light flashed. You've reached perfection in the Tao of the sword. You can't beat me like this. The guardian shook his head, and a long sword appeared in his hand as sword intent rose. Oh, is that so? Jiang Xi chuckled again. A dark red sword shadow suddenly appeared on the slaughtering shadow sword, faintly hiding under the dense sword shadow of the Tao of the sword. What? Tao fusion technique? Impossible. Even tribulation transcenders would find it difficult to completely grasp the Tao of the heaven and earth level Tao fusion technique. The guardian's expression changed. Come and fight. Jiang Xi shouted. The sword light whistled, and the long sword followed his figure, becoming tens of thousands of feet long. The sword shadow formed by the fusion of the Tao of the sword and the Tao of the fire was mighty, and its power spread throughout the entire space. As soon as the guardian saw this momentum, his expression became incomparably solemn. The soaring sword intent turned into all kinds of moves and fiercely collided with Jiang Xi's sword. The majestic impact swept through the entire space, destroying heaven and earth. 4,000 times spiritual energy amplitude versus 2,800 times spiritual energy amplitude. There was an absolute gap in strength. Swish. Riverward used less than 10 sword strikes to find the gatekeeper's flaw. With a thrust of his sword, he pierced through the other party's forehead. The second stage passed. Buzz, the space changed dramatically, and the space that had collapsed during the battle between the two returned to normal. The Guardian also revived. The Guardian said in a grave tone, "This time, you won with strength again. With your fighting skills, you will definitely lose in the next stage. Watch carefully." Jiang Xi smiled and disappeared. Then, he walked along the stone steps toward the platform of the third stage. At the same time, in Winesword Immortal's palace, the three immortals were still drinking and reminiscing about the past. Suddenly, Immortal Yi Liang frowned as he received a message. Jiang Xi just passed the second stage of the Skyspan Mountain. That kid is finally willing to move. Oh, let's go and take a look. Winesword Immortal was also interested. Immortal Ping smiled. She naturally followed Winesword Immortal's opinion. Then, with a thought, the three entered the Skyspan Mountain River painting with their spiritual senses. Their figures were hidden in the starry sky of the continent where the Skyspan Mountain was located, and they looked at the Green Lotus Skyspan Mountain. The third stage. Jiang Xi's figure fell into the third stage's illusory realm. As the Guardian had just been killed by Jiang Xi in the second stage, he only snorted. You won't be able to pass this stage with just the Tao fusion technique. Jiang Xi's expression was solemn and he did not speak. The Guardian's Tao power in the third stage was equivalent to an ordinary third-level Great Tao. In terms of spiritual energy amplitude, it was 3,700 times. After he used the Tao fusion technique, his spiritual energy amplitude was 4,000 times. From this point of view, he had the advantage. However, even a lion would use its full strength to hunt a rabbit. He would not underestimate any opponent. Therefore, he took the initiative to meet the Guardian with his sword. Chapter 358. In the eyes of many tribulation transcender powerhouses, Jiang Ci was a very good successor, and at the same time, he could help them a bit. As a young cultivator, being able to pass the third trial of the Heavenspan Mountain after cultivating for 10 years in the ancient Tao source world was already very talented. If there were no accidents in the future, it wouldn't be a big problem for him to reach the tribulation transcender realm. However, these tribulation transcender powerhouses also understood that they were just there to accompany him. Because among the tribulation transcender powerhouses of the Purple Heaven sect in Nine Firmament City, the strength and fame of Wine Sword Immortal and Sword Immortal Nangong far surpassed them. With these two immortals, Jiang Ci's chances of becoming their disciple were very small, compared to Wine Sword Immortal and Sword Immortal Nangong. In the past 50,000 years, Wine Sword Immortal had been in a depressed state and didn't teach anyone. Sword Immortal Nangong became the most famous tribulation transcender powerhouse in Nine Firmament City. Some people even guessed that if Wine Sword Immortal hadn't suddenly announced 10 years ago, Jiang Ci would most likely have chosen Sword Immortal Nangong as his disciple. But now, there was a change. Even though Wine Sword Immortal had been silent for 50,000 years, his popularity hadn't decreased, and he was still the #1 immortal. This time, Jiang Ci will definitely become my disciple. Sword Immortal Nangong was very confident, and his words were like a challenge to Wine Sword Immortal. In a palace near Nine Firmaments Palace, Wine Sword Immortal was leisurely drinking wine and singing in the attic, but his singing was out of tune. Immortal Ping was still the only audience. After Wine Sword Immortal finished singing, she smiled and said, "Big brother Zhongli, Sword Immortal Nangong has spoken. Aren't you worried at all? This kind of thing can't be rushed. That Nangong guy has been fighting with me for 10,000 years. I didn't expect him to still be like this. Let him be in the limelight first," Wine Sword Immortal said with a smile. The next day, Wine Sword Immortal's lesson started again. Sword Immortal Nangong seemed to have purposely changed the time of the Dharma lesson to this day. According to the rules of becoming a disciple, after the young cultivators of the ancient Tao source world passed the third trial of the Heavenspan Mountain, if they wanted to become the disciple of a powerhouse, they had to be under that powerhouse's tutelage. Jiang Ci didn't know what Jiang Dudu had done, nor did he know that he was being targeted by so many tribulation transcender powerhouses. Early in the morning, he tied up his long hair that had not been cut for 10 years, tidied up his clothes, carried a long sword on his back, and went out. Walking on the flagstone streets of Nine Firmament City, he headed toward the palaces of tribulation transcender powerhouses near Nine Firmaments Palace. He passed by the residences of tribulation transcender powerhouses one after another. Finally, he stopped in front of the Wine Sword Immortal's palace and walked in with steady steps. Sigh, the group of tribulation transcender powerhouses who still had a glimmer of hope sighed. But he lost wholeheartedly, who asked him to be the Wine Sword Immortal. 50,000 years ago, the Wine Sword Immortal had dominated the 9 stellar domains and was known as the #1 immortal in terms of popularity. If it wasn't for an accident that led to the birth of a heart demon, he would have long become a great Tao immortal. After all, the sword Tao of the Liquor Sword Immortal was already on par with that of a Tao immortal 50,000 years ago. Only Sword Immortal Nangong remained silent for a long while before shaking his head with a smile. Being able to cultivate to such a high level, he naturally wouldn't get angry over such things. He just didn't want to lose to the Wine Sword Immortal. Because it was an open class, Jiang Ci didn't have any restrictions and directly walked in. At this time, the Wine Sword Immortal was sitting at the front of the hall and hadn't started his lecture yet. When he saw Jiang Ci walk in, his expression didn't change at all. But the other cultivators who came to listen to the lecture were in an uproar. Recently, Jiang Ci's name had been known by many cultivators in Nine Firmament City below the immortal Tao realm. Many people had heard that this young man who had just arrived in the ancient Tao origin world had passed the third trial of the sky-piercing mountain a few days ago and was quite talented. Obviously, this was the first time Jiang Ci had come to listen to a lecture, so his purpose here was self-evident. They were all guessing whether the Wine Sword Immortal would accept Jiang Ci as his disciple. Under everyone's gaze, Jiang Xi calmly found a place to sit down cross-legged and waited for the Wine Sword Immortal to start his lecture. After about 15 minutes, the Wine Sword Immortal drank a mouthful of wine and started his lecture. Today, let's talk about what is a sword. This sentence instantly stunned all the cultivators in the hall. Cultivators who could enter the ancient Tao origin world naturally had good talent and comprehension, and they all came here to listen to the lecture with swords as their weapon of choice. What was a sword? This question couldn't be more simple. Was there even a need to explain it? The Wine Sword Immortal didn't care about everyone's doubts and continued, I'm sure some people will say that a sword is a type of weapon, a type of ritual tool, or something else. Actually, that's not wrong, but the essence of a sword isn't mentioned. A sword isn't just an object, it's a life with sentience and emotions. If you use a sword to kill people, your sword will be tainted with baleful aura and brutality. If you use a sword to do good, your sword will be tainted with righteousness and peace. Once the sword is tainted with these emotions, it will be like a person and possess the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Many troubles in the world are caused by emotions. If we treat a sword as a life form, in the end, we return to the essence. The sword is the heart. If you can reach this level, your sword Tao won't be too bad. Alright, this lecture ends here. All of you can leave now. See you next time. Everyone came back to their senses and realized that 3 days had already passed. They were completely immersed in the Wine Sword Immortal's words. Jiang Xi was also immersed in the lecture. As expected of the Wine Sword Immortal. What was the theory of the sword? It was as if he had been enlightened, and his understanding of the way of the sword had deepened. When everyone was about to leave, Jiang Xi took a deep breath and walked to the front of the hall. Since he had already made his decision, he wouldn't hesitate. Under everyone's gaze, he knelt on the ground and said, Disciple Jiang Xi is willing to take Immortal as my master. Jiang Xi's action caused another commotion. Everyone looked at the Wine Sword Immortal and wondered if this Immortal would take Jiang Xi as his disciple. Good, very good. The Wine Sword Immortal nodded lightly. All the cultivators were instantly filled with envy. The news of Jiang Xi successfully becoming the Wine Sword Immortal's disciple quickly spread. The geniuses had just been stimulated once, and this time, they were stimulated again. That was the Wine Sword Immortal, a 9th tribulation transcender who wasn't any weaker than a Tao immortal. This Jiang Xi is really abnormal. Mu Ning muttered and continued to ponder over his next song. Granny once said that if the Wine Sword Immortal could reverse life and death, he would be a top-notch Tao immortal. If Jiang Xi can become his disciple, his competitiveness will greatly increase in the future. Yang Jiufeng took a deep breath. Why did he improve so quickly? Kuang Lang found it hard to accept this news and was silent for a long time. The other geniuses were even crazier and worked hard to cultivate. However, it wasn't that easy to become the disciple of a tribulation transcender. They had to pass the 3rd trial of the sky-piercing mountain. And it was even more difficult to become the disciple of a powerhouse like the Wine Sword Immortal. It really depended on their mood. Chapter 359. Misty Mountain Immortal, past the 14th stage of the sky-piercing mountain, Thousand Flames Immortal, past the 16th stage of the sky-piercing mountain, Immortal Ping, past the 15th stage of the sky-piercing mountain, Sword Immortal Nangong, past the 19th stage of the sky-piercing mountain. Jiang Xi carefully browsed through the list. Although I have the experience points panel and don't have to worry about cultivating, choosing a master obviously has its benefits. Who should I choose? Jiang Xi's gaze fell on the Wine Sword Immortal's information. Wine Sword Immortal, past the 20th stage of the sky-piercing mountain, this level of strength had already surpassed most Tao immortals. Of course, strength was only secondary. Towards the Wine Sword Immortal, he was filled with gratitude. When he first came to the ancient Tao source world, if the Wine Sword Immortal hadn't told him to buy the melody of 10,000 swords, he would have been able to improve his cultivation. He was afraid that he would need to spend a long time exploring and fighting in order to improve his combat skills. This was also the benefit of having a master. With a knowledgeable person guiding him, he would be able to avoid many detours. Moreover, after I finish cultivating in the ancient Tao source world, I'll have to go to the Purple Heaven sect's headquarters. At that time, I'll have to find an opportunity to return the Purple Heaven sword scripture to the sect. This is a dangerous mission. I'll take a tribulation transcender as my master first. It'll be safer in the future. Thinking up to here, Jiang Ci suddenly shook his head and smiled bitterly. Taking a master was just an insurance. Because there was another question that he had to ask. Back then, he had been tricked by his master, Daoist Ge, into swearing an oath to return the Purple Heaven sword scripture to the Purple Heaven sect within 100 years. The key was this the 100 years he had experienced, or was it the 100 years of the original universe's normal flow of time? If it was the latter, then he was done for. This question had always been hidden in Jiang Ci's heart. Occasionally, he would feel apprehensive. Before the end of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, he hadn't thought that there would be a time difference between the original universe and the ancient Tao source world. Now, he could only wait for the original universe's 100 years to arrive. He had made the oath in the year 95 of the new moon, and it was now the 154th year of the new moon. According to the time difference between the ancient Tao source world and the original universe, there was still 41 years of the original universes. In other words, the ancient Tao source world's time. In the ancient Tao source world was a Tao source world's time. If I break the oath of the Tao, then my Daoist techniques will no longer be able to use inch force. This cheap master was really a big scammer. Damn it. Jiang Ci sometimes wondered why the Purple Heaven sect had so many big shots of the immortal Tao. Why would such an important inheritance like the Purple Cloud Sword Sutra be broken by Daoist Ge, a Tao integration cultivator? Was there any secret behind this? If there really is some secret, then I have to find a master to rely on. At the same time, in the Milky Way galaxy, planet Dongyuan. As the core life planet of the Milky Way galaxy, planet Dongyuan was even more prosperous. Because Jiang Ci was the lord of the Milky Way galaxy, the headquarters of the Mountain Sea Star Trade had been moved here more than 30 years ago. At this moment, in the Shanghai Interstellar Trade Headquarters in Anlan City on planet Dongyuan, Jiang Dudu, who had a slightly cold temperament, and a late-stage nascent soul female cultivator. Under the witness of the all-piercing eye, each of them left their own spiritual sense imprints on a document. Then, the late-stage nascent soul female cultivator smiled and said, "Junior Sister Jiang, you are also a member of the Purple Heaven sect from now on." "Senior Sister Yang, you must be joking. I'm not even an outer sect disciple now." Jiang Dudu smiled faintly. "Haha, with senior brother Jiang Ci here, as long as junior sister Jiang manages the Mountain Sea Star trade well, it will be easy for you to become a core disciple of the Purple Heaven sect in the future." Yang Fei was quite friendly. "Thank you for your kind words, senior sister Yang." Jiang Dudu smiled. The two of them chatted for a while more before Yang Fei left the Mountain Sea Star trade. After signing the agreement, Jiang Dudu felt like a stone had been lifted from her heart and she felt much more at ease. As a late-stage nascent soul cultivator from the Purple Heaven sect, Yang Fei's attitude towards her, a nascent soul cultivator, was very friendly. The reason was very simple. It was because Jiang Ci had passed the 3rd stage of the Skyspan Mountain in the ancient Tao origin world. The talent he had displayed had surpassed the other 2 4th Heaven young geniuses of the Purple Heaven sect. This news had already spread among the disciples of the Purple Heaven sect. Compared to Jiang Ci, Yang Fei was only a 1st Heaven disciple of the Purple Heaven sect. Her status was several levels lower. Chairman, will the Mountain Sea Star Trade be a subsidiary of the Purple Heaven sect in the future? Next to him, the general manager of the Mountain Sea Star Trade, Shen Wanxi, was still a little dizzy. Wen Yushin and Wen Feng were also very excited. With the Purple Heaven sect behind them, the Mountain Sea Star Trade would develop even faster in the future. That's right, but they will only take the dividends and can't interfere with the operation of the group, Jiang Dudu said with a smile. Jiang Dudu looked at the three of them. Yushin, Wen Feng, Old Shen, now is not the time to relax. The Mountain Sea Star Trade has now reached the scale of 10,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals. We have to reach 100,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals in 50 years. Are you confident? Yes. The Wen siblings and Shen Wansi were full of motivation. After the three of them left, Jiang Dudu looked at the flowing stars in the night sky and gently clenched her fists. The ninth heaven of the Purple Heaven sect is coming soon. She was looking forward to the scene when Jiang Xi finished cultivating in the ancient Dao origin world and went to the headquarters of the Purple Heaven sect. The Nine Zones Genius Tournament was not the only way to become a disciple of the Purple Heaven sect. In addition to the outstanding disciples that the star regions usually sent to the Purple Heaven sect, there were also special talents that could enter the Purple Heaven sect. After all, not everyone was good at cultivation. And a huge immortal Dao sect could not only rely on powerful cultivators to maintain normal operations. He also needed various management type, business type, and other talented cultivators. Not only the top immortal Dao sects of the star regions, but even the 3 gates and 6 sects would conduct business activities. After all, cultivation was ultimately about money. This time, Jiang Dudu had done some work. She had made the Mountain Sea Star Trade a subsidiary of the Purple Heaven sect and successfully entered the Purple Heaven sect. Of course, she was only an outer disciple now. If she wanted to enter the core and become a disciple of the ninth heaven of the Purple Heaven sect, she would need to continue working hard. If a disciple who specializes in business manages a star trade group with a scale of 100,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals, they can become a disciple of the first heaven of the Purple Heaven sect. 100,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals sounded like a small amount. If it was converted into low-grade spirit crystals, it would be a lot. 100 billion low-grade spirit crystals. If not for special circumstances, the first place of the Nine Zones Genius Tournament would only receive this amount of spirit crystals as a reward. They were the top geniuses selected from the billions of humans. For the Mountain Sea Star Trade Group, which had only been established 60 years ago, it would be very difficult to achieve this goal. In Nine Heavens City, the Tribulation Transcender powerhouses of the various sects who were qualified to teach the Purple Heaven sect were secretly competing with each other. 10 years ago, when Ji Wei had just passed the 3rd level, a similar situation had occurred. In the end, Ji Wei still became a disciple of a Dao immortal perfected lord. This made the Tribulation Transcender powerhouses sigh that they had missed a good disciple. And now, Jiang Xi had appeared. Chapter 360. In the eyes of many Tribulation Transcender powerhouses, Jiang Xi was a very good successor, and at the same time, he could help them a bit. As a young cultivator, being able to pass the 3rd trial of the Heavenspan Mountain after cultivating for 10 years in the ancient Dao Source world was already very talented. If there were no accidents in the future, it wouldn't be a big problem for him to reach the Tribulation Transcender realm. However, these Tribulation Transcender powerhouses also understood that they were just there to accompany him. Because among the Tribulation Transcender powerhouses of the Purple Heaven sect in Nine Firmament City, the strength and fame of Wine Sword Immortal and Sword Immortal Nangong far surpassed them. With these two immortals, Jiang Xi's chances of becoming their disciple were very small. Compared to Wine Sword Immortal and Sword Immortal Nangong. In the past 50,000 years, Wine Sword Immortal had been in a depressed state and didn't teach anyone. Sword Immortal Nangong became the most famous Tribulation Transcender powerhouse in Nine Firmament City. Some people even guessed that if Wine Sword Immortal hadn't suddenly announced 10 years ago, Jiang Xi would most likely have chosen Sword Immortal Nangong as his disciple. But now, there was a change. Even though Wine Sword Immortal had been silent for 50,000 years, his popularity hadn't decreased, and he was still the #1 immortal. This time, Jiang Xi will definitely become my disciple. Sword Immortal Nangong was very confident, and his words were like a challenge to Wine Sword Immortal. In a palace near Nine Firmaments Palace, Wine Sword Immortal was leisurely drinking wine and singing in the attic, but his singing was out of tune. Immortal Ping was still the only audience. After Wine Sword Immortal finished singing, she smiled and said, "Big brother Zhongli, Sword Immortal Nangong has spoken. Aren't you worried at all? This kind of thing can't be rushed. That Nangong guy has been fighting with me for 10,000 years. I didn't expect him to still be like this. Let him be in the limelight first, Wine Sword Immortal said with a smile. The next day, Wine Sword Immortal's lesson started again. Sword Immortal Nangong seemed to have purposely changed the time of the Dharma lesson to this day. According to the rules of becoming a disciple, after the young cultivators of the ancient Tao source world passed the third trial of the Heavenspan mountain. If they wanted to become the disciple of a powerhouse, they had to be under that powerhouse's tutelage. Jiang Ci didn't know what Jiang Dudu had done, nor did he know that he was being targeted by so many tribulation transcender powerhouses. Early in the morning, he tied up his long hair that had not been cut for 10 years, tidied up his clothes, carried a long sword on his back, and went out. Walking on the flagstone streets of Nine Firmament City, he headed toward the palaces of tribulation transcender powerhouses near Nine Firmaments Palace. He passed by the residences of tribulation transcender powerhouses one after another. Finally, he stopped in front of the Wine Sword Immortal's palace and walked in with steady steps. Sigh, the group of tribulation transcender powerhouses who still had a glimmer of hope sighed. But he lost wholeheartedly, who asked him to be the Wine Sword Immortal. 50,000 years ago, the Wine Sword Immortal had dominated the 9 stellar regions of the Tao Alliance and was known as the #1 immortal in terms of popularity. If it wasn't for an accident that led to the birth of a heart demon, he would have long become a great Tao immortal. After all, the sword Tao of the Liquor Sword Immortal was already on par with that of a Tao immortal 50,000 years ago. Only Sword Immortal Nangong remained silent for a long while before shaking his head with a smile. Being able to cultivate to such a high level, he naturally wouldn't get angry over such things. He just didn't want to lose to the Wine Sword Immortal. Here, because it was an open class, Jiang Ci didn't have any restrictions and directly walked in. At this time, the Wine Sword Immortal was sitting at the front of the hall and had yet to start his lecture. Seeing Jiang Ci come in, his expression didn't change at all. But the other cultivators who came to listen to the lecture were in an uproar. Recently, Jiang Ci's name had been known by many cultivators in Nine Firmament City below the immortal Tao realm. Many people had heard that this young man who had just arrived in the ancient Tao origin world had passed the third trial of the sky-piercing mountain a few days ago, and his talent was extraordinary. Obviously, this was the first time Jiang Ci had come to listen to a lecture, so his purpose here was self-evident. They were all guessing whether the Wine Sword Immortal would accept Jiang Ci as his disciple under everyone's gazes. Jiang Ci calmly found a place to sit down cross-legged and waited for the Wine Sword Immortal to teach him. After about 15 minutes, the Wine Sword Immortal drank a mouthful of wine and began his lecture. Today, let's talk about what is a sword. This sentence instantly stunned all the cultivators in the hall. Cultivators who could enter the ancient Tao origin world naturally had good talent and comprehension, and they all came here to listen to the lecture with swords as their weapon of choice. What was a sword? This question couldn't be more simple. Was there even a need to explain it? The Wine Sword Immortal didn't care about everyone's doubts and continued, I'm sure some people will say that a sword is a type of weapon, or a type of ceremonial tool, or something else. Actually, that's not wrong, but the essence of a sword isn't mentioned. A sword isn't just an object, it's a life with sentience and emotions. If you use a sword to kill, your sword will be tainted with baleful aura and brutality. If you use a sword to do good, your sword will be tainted with righteousness and peace. Once the sword is tainted with these emotions, it will be like a person, possessing the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Many troubles in the world are caused by emotions. If we treat a sword as a life form, in the end, we return to the essence. The sword is the heart. If you can reach this level, your sword Tao won't be too bad. Alright, this lecture ends here. All of you can leave now. See you next time. Everyone came back to their senses and realized that 3 days had already passed. They were completely immersed in the Wine Sword Immortal's words. Jiang Ci was also immersed in the lecture. As expected of the Wine Sword Immortal. The theory of what was a sword enlightened him, and it deepened his understanding of the sword Tao. When everyone was about to leave, Jiang Ci took a deep breath and walked to the front of the hall. Since he had already made his decision, he wouldn't hesitate. Under everyone's gaze, He knelt on the ground and said, "Disciple Jiang Ci is willing to take Immortal as my master." Jiang Ci's action caused another commotion. Everyone looked at the wine sword Immortal, wondering if this Immortal would take Jiang Ci as his disciple. Good, very good. The wine sword Immortal nodded lightly. All the cultivators were instantly filled with envy. The news of Jiang Ci successfully becoming the wine sword Immortal's disciple quickly spread. The geniuses had just been stimulated once, and this time, they were stimulated again. That was the wine sword Immortal, a ninth tribulation transcender who wasn't any weaker than a Dao immortal. This Jiang Ci is really abnormal. Mu Ning muttered and continued to ponder over his next song. Granny once said that if the wine sword Immortal could reverse life and death, he would be a top-notch Dao immortal. If Jiang Ci can become his disciple, his competitiveness will greatly increase in the future. Yang Jiufeng took a deep breath. Why did he improve so quickly? Kuang Lang couldn't accept this news and was silent for a long time. The other geniuses were even crazier and worked hard to cultivate. However, it wasn't that easy to become the disciple of a tribulation transcender. They had to pass the third trial of the Skyspan Mountain. And it was even more difficult to become the disciple of a powerhouse like the Wine Sword Immortal. It really depended on their mood. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.